was going to say, that was light.
Don't worry, you'll get it.
I was going to say, that's next month.
Okay, good evening, everybody. It is April 11th, and it's 6:30 p.m., and this is the monthly regular meeting of the East Bay Charter Township Board. We'll call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'll join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, with that, Ann, will you do a roll call attendance? And Matt Cook is excused and notified us earlier.
Okay, Bartlett.
Yes.
Lyle.
Here.
Walters.
Yes.
Matt Cortade.
Here.
Sue Cortade.
Here.
And Beth Friend.
Here. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the agenda. You can see the agenda items in front of you. Is there anyone on the board that has a conflict of interest with any item? Okay, not seeing any, we'll move forward to the approval of the agenda. I will note that Wade Trim was not able to be here tonight, so we will not have that update at this meeting. And I would like to move the Werfel Resorts liquor license to the first item under A. And other than that, is there a motion for the approval of the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda is amended.
Okay, motion by Lyle, second by
Walter.
Walters. It's been a long
It
day.
don't get any better when you get older.
It's been a long day. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed by no? Okay, motion passes. We'll move forward with the agenda. This is the opportunity for public comment, and with that, Ann, would you read the rules for public comment, please?
Sure. The purpose of the public comment is to give members of the public an opportunity to express their views and opinions to the members of the commission. To maintain order and ensure fairness to every speaker, the following rules must be followed. Speakers will approach the podium and introduce themselves by stating their name and address, and then proceed to make their comment. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and is only allowed to speak once on the same matter. Communication previously emailed to the board is not necessary to read aloud. Public comment time may not be given to another member of the public. Any arrangement for speaking on behalf of others must be arranged prior to the meeting. When your time is at 2 minutes, 30 seconds, you will be alerted with the yellow signal to wrap up your comment. And at 3 minutes, you will be alerted with a red signal, and the chair will ask you to conclude your comments.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we will accept a public comment during the discussion on short-term rentals. So if you are going to be here during that discussion, if you hold your public comment until that agenda item, and Ann, if you'll remind me to open that up for public comment as well, or any board member. If you can't stay through that agenda item, feel free to include that with the first opportunity for public comment. So with that, if anyone would like to make a comment, they're welcome to stand to the podium, introduce themselves, and deliver their public comment. Yes, sir. Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good.
Brian Lettinga, Scout Camp Road. I'm just here to share some continued concerns that many of us have in the Forest Lakes area with the PUD from GOREC that you're about to consider, and ask that you reconsider the application of that PUD and reject it in its wholeness until you can review it a little bit more. A lot of citizens in that area have been gone for several months, taking advantage of the different climates all over the U.S. and are now slowly making their ways back. It just doesn't seem right that we would make a decision without a community involvement. While there have been some Zoom meetings, I get that, and also with real clear lack of evidence to the decisions that you might be making. You know, I have not seen any clear evidence from you all, not that you need to produce it, that would suggest that a passage of that PUD really makes sense to the overlay of the Forest Lakes. And what evidence have you collected that proves that it will improve the quality of life of everybody in that area? And with that, I'd like to invite you to my house and have a look across the lake and just see how close that is. because the canopy of trees in the summer may be there, but that doesn't stop noise from being projected across the lake. And with such grandiose ideas for races and events, that noise level is going to travel into Spider Lake, into that back cove. I can guarantee that. Up and down Last Bay Road, the increased traffic is going to be there, and I really hope that you will reconsider this, and in doing so, plan to, perhaps share the reasons for ignoring the ordinance that is in place to stop this from happening, so the community understands that you've heard all the evidence, collected the evidence, and then chosen to grant the PUD with a body of evidence that proves it's worthwhile. Because I don't think many people really understand why you would want to approve this when there's an ordinance preventing things of this grandiose size from happening. So with that said, I'm looking forward to you reconsidering this, and if you choose to go forward, I'm also looking forward to a detailed explanation of what evidence you've collected along the way that has moved you to make a vote in favor of it. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. The pronunciation of your last name, Latinga?
Lettinga, yep.
Lettinga? Okay. Thank you very much. Please don't take, we can't take you up on your offer as far as we can't. Okay.
For the record.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other public comment? Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
My name is Molly DeBell, and I live on Tranquil Point Road. And I just want to second a lot of what he said. I have a lot of concerns myself about this PUD that you will be reviewing in the upcoming weeks. And so a couple of concerns that I have is, one is enforcement, and I think he spoke to some of the issues already. Noise issues, and, there are going to be multiple events on this property. On one day, there can be multiple events, and this property is open to the public 365 days a year. And there is no way to enforce all of the rules and regulations that are in place to protect the other residents on the lake. And there's only one enforcement officer, and he doesn't even work weekends. And so there's no way to enforce, noise issues, drunk and disorderly issues, anything like that. And I know that in the past, Gorrick said that, if there was a problem, we could just call 911 and get the sheriff out there. Well, so first of all, it's questionable whether the sheriff or law enforcement would even respond to some of these kinds of calls. And second of all, I feel like that's like the taxpayers kind of subsidizing inappropriate behavior on behalf of Gorrick. And so I don't really think that's fair. And your own staff at Township staff at previous meetings has talked about how difficult it is to enforce some of these rules and regulations. And I know in my own neighborhood, I know that on multiple occasions, rules and regulations have been violated. And it's either because it's difficult to enforce, or because the township has just decided to just ignore it and let it slide. And so I really hope that this Gorrick issue isn't another situation where the township says, oops, we made a mistake. Well, too late now, we can't do anything about it. Because people are bringing these issues to your attention way in advance of any of this stuff happening. So there's plenty of time to consider all of the negative consequences that could happen here. And the other thing that I want to say about that is that, with all of the opposition that there is against this proposal, and all of the legal and legitimate reasons that people have brought to your attention, I just, it feels like the township, there's all of these rules and regulations and ordinances in place, the forest lake overlay, the master plan, all of this kind of stuff. It feels like the township just chooses to ignore all of that stuff, or come up with some reason that they can just wave it away. And I think those things are in place as a protection for the environment and for the people and the taxpayers of the area. And yet I think the township is just so quick to just sort of wave all that away like it doesn't matter. And I don't think that that's right. And it just, my last comment is going to be that, I sat through multiple of these planning commission meetings, and like I said, people brought up one objection after another, and it just felt like the Planning Commission already had their mind made up. I don't really think they listened to the taxpayers, to the citizens of the township. I don't think they cared about all of their concerns, and they just had their mind made up, and they went ahead and approved this anyway. And for whose benefit? I don't know whose benefit this is for.
Thank you for your comment, Mrs. DeBelle.
You're welcome.
Any further public comment? Hello.
Hello. Good evening. I'm Linda Deneen, and I live on Lighthouse Cove on Bittersweet Lane, right opposite Govec. Matter of fact, I invite you to come to my house too, if you'd like to, and you can look right across the cove and see Govec's driveway. So, I would like to remind you, please, excuse me, I would like to remind you, please, as you consider the Govec PUD and the recommendation that our Planning Commission has given you, I would like to remind you, please, to consider the riparians and the residents of Grolic Road, of South Spider Lake Road, and those of us who live on Lighthouse Cove. In terms of the traffic studies, the light studies, and the sound studies that have already been mentioned. We've not really been considered, only the adjacent properties. And I can tell you right now, the lights from Gorek's driveway shine right in our house. And I'm sure that they shine in our neighbors' houses as well. So that's one thing. Another thing, as you consider the Gorek PUD, please think ahead 7 generations. I know that's kind of like a long, long time, long after all of us are gone. But the impacts that your decision will have will be in place for probably more than 7 generations. So just a thought to remember, and a major thought to remember and consider. Another point that I'd like to make is that isn't there some other path that GOREC could take to financially subsidize themselves? Couldn't they use a vehicle that's already in place, like a transient activity permit, and just keep their campground going as it is now with the nice classes and the camping, and have day use be allowed? Furthermore, this winter, and I'll show you this picture, actually, copy of a picture, and I have some copies. I don't have enough. My printer ran out of ink. Sorry. However, GOREC has said that there would be no motorized vehicles or no motorized craft. However, all kinds of snowmobiles and four-wheelers and ATVs access GOREC property, or access Spider Lake through GOREC property, and have eroded that embankment. And there's all kinds of pollution coming right across Hobbs Highway, flowing right into Spider Lake, causing a damage and harm to the water quality, and also to the roadbed itself. So at any rate, if GOREC can't manage their own property right now, and just that one little piece of property, and that's a very tiny slice as it intersects Hobbs Highway there. And I'm sure you're all aware of, well, I hope you would be aware of that prime fishing spot out there. Many people have used that land for many, many years, and I'm wondering, if GOREC can't manage that now, how can they manage 500 acres?
Those you could give to our recording secretary, and then we'll have them. And did you say your last name was Deneen?
Deneen,
Thank
that's
you,
right.
Ms. Deneen.
Thank you.
Any other public comment this evening? Yes, and if there's anyone after this resident, please go ahead and feel free to make your way up towards the podium. How are you this evening?
Good, how are you?
Good.
My name's Becky Geyer, I live on Scout Camp. We're really confused. We have not heard the reasons why East Bay Township Planning Commission thought it was a great idea to provide legal exceptions to GOREC for their PUD application. So we're really confused. What are the clear benefits to the residents of East Bay Township? Why is there pressure to approve this plan? Why was it approved? The feel of this process is wrong. It feels as if GOREC came in with a plan that was fully in line with township ordinances, and it's the residents that are trying to get the planning commission to make exceptions. Well, this is exactly backwards. It's GOREC that has plans that do not fit the township ordinances, and it's the township that's favoring GOREC and providing special exceptions to its own laws and ordinances. Why? We know why Rotary and GOREC want the PUD. They want to make as much money as possible with it, and we all have real concerns and valid concerns, but this isn't between the residents and Rotary and GOREC. We tried that, and nothing happened. The only changes GOREC was willing to make were ones that were required by a lawsuit. So you are the East Bay Township, and you represent the residents of the township. So why did the Planning Commission almost unanimously vote in favor of GOREC and the Rotary and give them special exceptions to our laws? And we still have not heard the great reasons why having large events and using the site for commercial purposes like events and building a large campground is so great for East Bay Township. You've heard dozens of reasons and legitimate reasons why the plan hurts East Bay Township residents, and yet you favor the very plan that so many residents oppose. This place was filled with residents who oppose this, and you are now going directly against the needs and the concerns of the very residents you're supposed to represent. If you do, everyone needs to hear, and like we said earlier tonight, I've heard already, the clear and compelling reasons why you're going against your own residents. This is not the responsibility of GOREC or the Rotary. It's your responsibility. So please, please, please tell us what the reasons are. We're dying to hear.
Thank you, Ms. Squire. Have a good evening. Hello, how are you?
Hi, good. Jill Bernardi, Rennie View Road resident, Forest Lakes representative. It's nice to see everybody, and it is really, really refreshing to hear you engaging. This is my first time in front of the trustees, and what a breath of fresh air it is, I must say. So thank you. You, Tracy, have seen the difference, I'm sure, being on both sides. And I'm sorry that took up a couple seconds of my 3 minutes, but I'm already just so much more comfortable in this room. So thank you, honestly, for that. A lot of comments that I had were already said. When we left that meeting last time, Tracy, I think that you can attest to the fact that we were all pretty upset. I don't think many of us expected a different answer because the writing was pretty much on the wall already. But I think you can tell we were really upset with the process and the lack of information. The explanation for the answers weren't there other than we reached a happy medium. That doesn't seem to be a good legal response or setup for an approval. I just have a couple things. This was something I played around with, if I may.
If you could just hand all the copies to Ann, you can reference them in your comment, and we'll look at them later.
Oh, it's such a pretty big handout.
I appreciate that.
So all this is I'm sure you've seen layers of protection charts before. So all this is something that our attorney, when she'd made a presentation, which, by the way, some of the commissioners were not even paying attention. I actually videotaped them not paying attention to our attorney. You know, we talked about how many layers of protection are on that property in order to stop things from harming it in the future. People, generations before us, made these decisions. So I can't imagine how many more layers of protection, multiple layers of ordinances to preserve and protect forest lakes. Interpretation of intended use is undeniably clear. Master plan, future land use map, lakes area zoning, low-density residential, forest lakes overlay, conservation easement, community engagement, safe forest lakes, and then the promises of GOREC and the Rotary. How many more layers of protection can there possibly be to avoid the avoidance of following ordinances? I don't understand. Somebody has to understand that that land is supposed to be protected. It doesn't make any sense to any of us, as you can see. The other point I wanted to make, and I'll make it really quick, is I did a scientific study. We hired the same scientific study people that GoRec used on all of their studies. Here it is. This is the chart that the engineers used. I went through the comments that the public made in all of the agenda charts. Supportive GoRec, public comments that were sent in. You know what you're referring to? Okay. This is through December through March, not including all of our generic repeated. Supportive GoRec, or supportive PUD, 100. Opposed to PUD, 70. Supportive events, 4. Opposed to events, 75. More people were opposed to events than were opposed to the PUD. Supportive outdoor activities, 162. We're in support of outdoor activities. Opposed to outdoor activities, none. Opposed to environmental impacts and AIS, 16. Please understand that it is not our intention to stop GoRec from functioning, to stop the entire community from enjoying that area. It is our intention to stop that event center and the pollution and all that other stuff, the craziness that's going on, and to stop the community in the township from passing this PUD when it clearly doesn't fit with any of the ordinances.
Thank you, Ms. Bernardi.
Thank you.
Any other further public comment? Hi, Ms. Kusel, how are you? If anyone else would like to make public comment, if you'll just make your way up behind Carol so that we can go right along. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Carol Kusel, East Bay Township resident, voting citizen, property owner. Recently, there have been several changes in the process of the Planning Commission meetings. These changes are not citizen-friendly. Rather, they seem to decrease active participation of citizens. For example, at the March 24th meeting, the agenda was approved with a minor change in the order to allow time for 2 commissioners to arrive late. However, item 8, including the wording, quote, "public comment opportunity during each agenda item," was not adhered to, or was not altered, and then it was not adhered to. It was not allowed at all. The commissioners then made their decision on the GoRec PUD without following the agenda they approved. What I submitted was the agenda for that meeting with those words present. A second example is that previously the chair instructed citizens and the commissioners to address their questions to him. He would write the questions down, and later he would address those questions to the appropriate person, the applicant, the staff, the attorney, the engineer. That process has not been followed over the last few months. I believe that change in process cuts out the important mix of input from the citizens, from the commissioners, and key steps in the fact-finding process before the decisions are made. A third example is that a significant amount of information is provided to the planning commissioners at the start of the meeting, thick packets, in addition to their already thick packets. That does not allow ample time for them to adequately review and seek additional information. And that information is often not posted in the agenda packets after the meetings are over. So then citizens aren't allowed to review that information that has been distributed. Even information that's posted in the packets are following policies consistently. This may seem really simple, but it seems like it should be able to be followed. For instance, email addresses and residential addresses in citizen correspondence, in some correspondence, they're redacted. In others, they're not. What's the reason for that? A final example is the change in allocating speaking time at the PC meetings. They're down to 3 minutes, as you have the process here. That hadn't been in place in the past. I understand that generally, the recommended time is from 3 to 5 minutes, so putting it down to the 3 minutes makes it kind of tough for citizens to explain some of these concerns in these very complex issues. And also, I just wonder why or how that came to be. Who made the decision to come up with that policy in the PC meetings? It doesn't, I've attended many meetings, it didn't seem like it was a vote among them. In conclusion, as elected officials, you appoint the commissioners and the staff, and I assume that you have duties as well. So, as our elected officials, would you please, 1, review these concerns I've brought before you, 2, determine the lawful and accepted practices, 3, incorporate ways to assure that our township citizens can continue to be active, informed participants in township meetings. And lastly, please share your findings and your recommended actions at the next meeting. I respectfully submit these suggestions.
Thank you, Ms. Kusel. Is there any further public comment? Okay, with that, we will move on to correspondence and reports. And the board will notice that we have 3 items in there. One is a congratulations to Tracy Bartlett on her certification for a certified public fund investment manager. Very well done. And we also have the PAR Plan news, so, and we thank Glenn for being on that board, and we will be submitting a grant application for that.
So did he make it again?
Well, I think the election is coming up, right?
Yes.
For the board, yeah. And then you'll notice there was a nice article about one of our colleagues' wife who serves in the Coast Guard in the area, so I included that as well. I do want to mention to you, too, just take the opportunity during correspondence to let you know that I have been working with the Grand Traverse County Conservation District on doing some projects for the township during Bob's absence. So they've been, initial contact with Steve Largent, they've been a really good resource. So we'll see what comes of that. So with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Beth, I did want to just add one thing if
Sure.
I can. Being a mid-year election, the township is still accepting applications for candidate, the appointments. Anyone that is interested has until 4 PM.
April
next
19th?
Tuesday, the 19th,
Okay.
to have their completed packet submitted. Earlier is better than later, but I just wanted to make sure
Sure.
that we reiterated that again.
Very good, thank you. Appreciate that.
Did you say 4 PM?
By 4 PM, yes. And it's for the 3 Park Commission and 1 Township Board of Trustees.
With that, we'll move on to the consent calendar. And Ann, if you'll go over the consent calendar?
Sure. The purpose of the consent agenda is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one board motion without discussion. Any member of the board, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent agenda be removed and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such request will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent agenda, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single board action adopting the consent calendar. This evening, you have the board minutes of March 14th, 2022. Recommend approval. In the general fund, check numbers 16942 through 17010, paid in the amount of $86,500.21. Check number 16829 was previously approved and lost in the mail. And check number 16999 was voided. From the emergency fund, check numbers 4938 through 4967, in the amount of $62,577.96. From the receiving fund, check numbers 2856 through 2858, in the amount of $35,493.99. Escrow fund, check numbers 1829 through 1834, the amount of $29,496.89. There were no checks issued from the roads fund, and there were 2 payrolls. The first payroll dated February 27th through March 12th, check number 7307 through 7311, total $52,411.44. And the payroll from March 13th through March 26th, check number 7312 through 7316, and that totaled $52,574.13. Total payroll amount, $104,985.57. Total amount paid, $319,054.62. There are no proposed budget adjustments at this time, and we have 4 other items: Bayfield Road naming, Blight vendor invoice, Granicus contract amendment, and East Bay Library furnace.
Thank you very much. With that consent agenda presented, is there anyone on the board who would like anything removed from the consent agenda? Yes.
The Granicus contract amendment.
Okay, we will move that to the end of business in number 8. Anything further? Okay, is there any member of the public that would like anything removed from the consent calendar? Okay, we'll bring that back to the board for a motion on the consent agenda with the Granicus contract amendment removed.
I make the motion to approve with the exception of the Granicus agreement.
Motion by Bartlett and supported by Escortade. Any further discussion? Okay, Ann, we'll do a roll call vote.
Bartlett.
Yes.
Escortade.
Yes.
Lyle.
Yes.
Walters.
Yes.
M. Cortade.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to the business before the Township Board, and we have changed the order that we will take up first the Werfel's Resorts liquor license. And so with that, is there anyone here on the applicant's part? Yes, if you wouldn't mind coming up. So I'm just going to briefly recap and then allow you to make any comments, and then we'll take it back to the board for discussion, okay? Is Jason Werfel? Josh Werfel, okay, Josh, thank you for being here. So with this is a request for an on-premise Class C liquor license, and this would be at the hotel that they are proposing that is on the Amalfitano property, correct? Correct. Okay. You have some, in your packet, you have the request from Josh. You have the resolution of local government approval that is required for the application. You have general Class C licensing requirements and general information. And then you have a listing of our current active conditional and escrowed licenses from the state. So with that, Sue, did you have anything to add from this? I know you had the initial email contact from Mr. Werfel.
Well, Mr. Werfel has reached out to me maybe quarterly for the last 5 years, asking for information on when a liquor license would become available. This one became available because of the census. When our population went larger, it freed up, it gave us one more license. So I did reach out to Josh to let him know, and he has gone through the legwork that you see and what you have added to move forward with this request.
Okay, very good. Mr. Werfel, do you have anything to add?
Everything was presented to the Planning Commission in reference to the hotel. It is a multi-story property with currently an exposed deck on the top floor that we're planning on serving from. We are going through the process of answering some questions from the Township's attorney in reference to the actual height of the building, and we've got it down to 3 questions. So we're going through that process. Everything else was conditionally approved at the Planning Commission. The deck itself is going to be handle approximately 49 people on it, and then we're planning on being able to provide the guests in the property the opportunity to enjoy both the deck and in-room alcohol.
Okay, and so that's a currently active application with the Planning Commission?
That is, it was approved at last Planning Commission under conditions.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, so we'll bring that back to the board. Mindy?
I have 2 questions. I don't see a resolution in my packet.
Well, there should be one in there. It's not in the standard format that our township one is usually. Page 56.
All right, I was looking for our standard.
That was just a lot of retyping to go into our standard resolution. I also didn't want to throw off the Liquor Control Commission with a different formatted resolution, so.
So here's the thing at Planning Commission, and one of the conditions and why I'm I'm wondering if this is the right time for this. I think that there's an issue that might be cart before the horse. At Planning Commission, the walk tower, is that the right term for it? Watch.
Walk.
In our zoning ordinance, it says that you can't have anyone on a floor occupy, right? That's the word? Occupy above 35 feet. And on the plans, there is no dimension to the bottom of this platform. There is a dimension that is 1 foot lower, but if the drawing is to scale, this is significantly higher, several feet higher than that. So that's one of the conditions that are on the approval, is figuring out where that floor is and making sure it complies with the zoning ordinance of the 35 feet. It is a condition that we, at the Planning Commission, didn't request to come back to us, and that staff could figure it out, you know, what that actual dimension is. But I'm just still want to make sure that that's done and figured out before this. I think they're going to shave off some of the building if it's not, to make sure it is.
So can I answer the question?
Sure, of course.
So we've gone back to structural engineering in reference to this. The question that Mindy points out is we're 11 inches in question. We have been able to make the modification in the floor joist spaces to bring that down underneath the 35 feet threshold. We're in the process of putting that together, providing it to staff after staff has presented us with some other questions of clarity from your attorney, Mr. Graham. So we're not going to have a problem with that. Even if that becomes a problem and we close off that space, we're still planning on having apply for alcohol sales at this particular property to provide it to our guests. So we're
Okay.
still looking for approval in reference to this particular property, no matter what.
Okay, thank you. Claire Garner, could I take advantage of having you here this evening? I don't know that there's anything that you would want to add on top of what Mindy has mentioned and top of what Josh has mentioned, but just giving you the opportunity in case.
I don't think so. We followed up the next morning with Brian Graham, legal counsel, that had originally reviewed the height, building height, asked some follow-up questions. So I feel confident that anything that would be approved would be in line with the ordinance, but we're still working through the details on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, further comments? Sure.
So in the resolution coming to the township board, this is all good conversation, but we are basically just saying, yes, he brought it to us, and we voted on it. It still has to be approved at the state. But what he is doing in satisfying that is saying, I have brought it to the township. The state will then have the police also be part of that processing to have that opportunity for approval. It is. It's so that business owners can't just submit their liquor license request to the state. They have to come through their local board.
But there are, I mean, I'm not suggesting that this is the case. I'm just saying the resolution does offer the opportunity for disapproval, and you state those reasons too. So, okay.
The letter says that their intent is to have the open-air deck, which is what is in question in that planning commission.
Okay.
I feel that it's going to be resolved. I feel that they're going to find 12 inches somewhere in that building. Well, 11 and a little hair, if you will, because it's got to be under the 35 feet. I believe that they are going to, but I just want to I kind of want to conditionally approve that on that being figured out, and I don't know if there's a way with this resolution format.
Okay. So any other comments or questions at this point? So I was just going to recap maybe some of the options that we have available to us. You know, one would obviously be to approve the local government authorization as it's templated to us from the state. Another would be to deny, and we would have to list those reasons for disapproval. And again, as Mindy mentions, if there is a the ability to conditionally approve it or to table it until May and approve it then, when seemingly that would be resolved and documented that it's resolved.
So I do have a question from
Sure.
Mr. Werfel. So what I'm understanding you saying tonight is that it would be for the patrons that are staying at the hotel only. It would not be a public place?
At this point in time, because of the size of the property and the limitations we have with the number of people on the deck, the project has always gone underneath the guise that we will provide to the patrons first of the property, and then based on flow of people, we use the opportunity in slower times to bring in outside people, but we don't have a choice. We have to limit the number of people on this upper deck because of the configuration of the property to 49. That's it. That being said, we do have other outside spaces, but again, we're limited to the number of parking spots, that we have to be very conscientious of the number of parking spots. We have to be very conscious of the flow of traffic, but we also have neighboring hotels that we could provide activities for them as well. But it's, at this point in time, we have to be very careful on the flow, and we have to understand how the operations of this particular property, because every hotel operates differently. Guests move differently. We have to understand what this was going to be.
Thank you.
Tracy, did you have a question
Yeah, I just,
or comment?
I would just say the letter that you provided doesn't say in-room alcohol. It just talks about the open-air roof area. So depending on what happens here, if you have to bring it back, I would add that, just so that it would be part of the record, just because you said that, but to Mindy's point, it doesn't say that in the letter, just.
The point being is that you have to take the alcohol
Down to their room.
It's
You
not-
wouldn't
we're gonna-
serve it to them,
it's not- We're not a full-service restaurant, so we're not planning on
serving it to their room?
They would have
Oh,
to come and get it from
okay.
and then-
All right, I'm
and
sorry, then that,
move it to their room
They-
on their own.
okay, all right, that makes sense.
Glenn?
I don't have any comment.
Oh, I thought you.
No, I was going to bring up exactly what Mindy did. If the board felt that some way of holding back is put it on a contingent of the other, but really, I don't know how it would tie in with it. I mean, we got two different things. The
What do you
liquor
think how it would tie in?
Well, they can't.
with height,
They can't have this open roof area currently.
okay, but they can, assume they could have, the bar isn't going to be on top of the roof area, so there isn't.
It is.
It is.
Oh, okay.
But,
So it's totally
but there is, but we do have room inside the property that if we had to, we could move
Okay.
bar internally.
Right.
That is not currently our goal, but if there was an event that made that our goal.
So what is your estimated time for construction?
Hopefully, to be honest, we're going to be able to resolve within a week our height issue, and we're going to move very quickly to break ground in May. We want to be open May of '23
Okay,
to June of '23.
so this
Based on-
process would be, we would be able to take care of this process during that time. So tabling it a
Liquor
month.
licenses take anywhere between 8 to 12 months.
Okay.
And so I'm right at the threshold, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So would you prefer us to table this or add to this to mess up the liquor control board?
I kind of don't know that,
could
I think they give us two options, really, and that's to approve it, or then there's an area for disapproval. And I kind of think we'd be throwing a wrench into the system if we were to do some type of conditional on the resolution. However, I'm wondering, could we approve it with conditional, sending it upon the clarification of the issue with the project? So we would maybe send it out in 2 weeks or something like that. And if it wasn't, we would bring it back to the board.
I'm comfortable moving it ahead with a condition if that's what the board feels.
Okay. All right. Claire, would you be fine with that condition? Okay.
So you ready for a motion?
Yeah.
Just a second. I just have one question. Now, these liquor licenses always confuse me a little bit. Is this attached to the building, or does it just go with your company LLC or whatever?
Everybody puts the liquor licenses in separate LLC was advised by their attorneys, and those LLCs are then typically, based on my attorney's comments, attached to some part of the building in order to, so that you, for the state, 'cause it gets, this is the easiest process is with you gentlemen and you ladies. Once you get to the state, it gets very complicated on making sure that you abide by all their rules, and what happens
Josh,
is.
can I have you move your mic? Sorry.
My apologies.
Thank you.
So the idea is that it would be attached to a part of the building. The state will come in and draw a diagram in the building and indicate this is where you can serve your liquor from.
You know, but what I'm interested in is, does the license stay with the building? So let's say you sell the building, does the license stay with the building, or can you take it with you like others have done in the past?
My understanding, Matt, is that's proprietarily owned. Like, you'll see this list on the last page of the packet. So, for example, Henschel's owns that liquor license. They could choose to sell that to somebody, take that someplace else. But he's right that they do understand or document where they're able to utilize that. So he's not having a bar, 10 feet off of the street. And then as well, that's what they do when they do their inspections too.
So to answer Mr. Cortez's question directly, from what I understand, all the licenses are transportable. It doesn't make a difference if it's the one that I'm applying for or the one that, for an example, the old Waterfront Inn used to have. People come in and move those around based on the need. Hooters just disappeared. Elmbrook might disappear in the coming years. So those are transportable. I know there's multiple ones in escrow that were owned by different places. There's no way to control based on the way the State Liquor Commission has set it up to control that.
Right, and that's kind of where the confusion comes for me, is we're allowed 11.
Right,
But those 11 can go somewhere else, and we could end up without any.
I understand that. That's not, I've been asking Ms. Cortez for years to try to obtain a liquor license for the multiple properties that we've had, and it just got very lucky that one just came available for this new project, because they're not easy to obtain. And I will say that specifically.
My understanding is there's only certain ones that are transportable in and out of the community. So the one that was from Hooters, if my recollection was, didn't that one come from Saginaw?
The which one for Hooters? I'm sure.
Yeah. Go
A
ahead.
resort class 550 can come from anywhere in the state. There were initially 550 liquor licenses created once Prohibition ended, and they were put around the state. They are able to be purchased if they go into escrow or the business folds or sells. They are not very easily obtainable, but like when Ruby Tuesdays went out, if they had another Ruby Tuesdays they wanted to put somewhere else, they could just take it with them, and we don't have any say on it.
Right.
But there's only 550. The other ones, like Mr. Werfel is looking, is based on quota.
Jurisdiction.
And quota is through population.
Yeah. Mindy?
That's what I was just going to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Okay, going back, did you have any further comment, Matt? Okay. It's always interesting, and we get these not all that frequently, so you often have to go back and recall what you went through the last time that we had one. Is there a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve the liquor license for Werfel Resort L Spirits LLC.
Is there a condition to that, or?
No.
Okay. Is there support?
Support.
Okay, a motion by Lyle, support by Cortade to approve resolution. I'm going to, if you wouldn't mind, friendly, approving the resolution, and then, do we have a number with this?
I did not do that as a state resolution. I just felt that it was
Let's
through the Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs.
Let's take a look at our last minutes and see if we had our last resolution on there. Okay, we had 2, 3.
Next one would be 5.
Where's 4?
I was going to
On
say
the last
4 is the
page.
last
Last page?
page. Yeah.
Oh, I see that.
The Park
Okay.
Plan Board of Directors.
Okay, so 2022-4, Glenn?
5.
I'm sorry, 5. Sorry, 5. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, is that fine, Sue? Sure. All right. Any further discussion? Ann will do a roll call vote.
Lyle.
Yes.
S. Cortade.
Yes.
M. Cortade.
No.
Bartlett.
Yes.
Walters.
No.
And Friend.
No. Okay, thank you very much. The motion passes, and we'll send that resolution along.
3-3.
Oh, was it 3-3?
No, it
I'm
was
sorry.
2-4.
No, it was 3-3.
There's no 4 here.
It was
I had
3-3.
Walters and M. Cortade.
And I said no. Sorry, it was
Oh, and you
3-3. I
said
was
no.
thinking we
Okay,
had.
then we have a 3-3, then it is not a.
The motion fails. I'm very sorry about that, Mr. Werfel. I forgot that Matt wasn't here. So with that, it fails. And what I would expect to do then is bring that back before the board in April, if that's fine with the rest of the board members.
April?
I'm sorry, May. Did I mention the long day that it's been? We'll have, go ahead.
Make another motion?
Oh, of course you can.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 20-2205, a request from Morphle Park for local government approval for new on-premises Class C license to be submitted with their application to the State Liquor Control Department for approval, with the condition that Planning Commission staff have approved their site plan. Is it anything else? Is it just a site plan? Okay.
Upon
Upon approval of the site.
approval of the site plan. Okay.
Support.
Okay, motion by Walters, support by Lyle, and it would be approval of the resolution upon that stipulation. Any questions or further comment?
Yeah, I always thought that with the liquor license application is that you can't put any stipulations in there.
Yeah, and so I think what Mindy is doing, and clarify me if I'm wrong on the resolution, but you're not changing the resolution. You're just saying that we'll approve the resolution. We will send that along upon that documented, reaching that criteria. If that doesn't happen, then that won't be sent, and that will be notified back to the board.
So it's not written anywhere on the resolution. that
Exactly.
it's a condition.
Yes.
It's a separate,
It's a condition of
Attachment.
and it wouldn't be an attachment because it wouldn't go to the state.
Well, it wouldn't go to the state, but
Right.
it would be within the township.
That's right. Okay, so there is a motion by Walters, support by Lyle. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote, and we'll try to count this
We're going to try
time.
this again. Walters.
Yes.
Lyle.
Yes.
M. Cortade.
No.
Bartlett.
Yes.
S. Cortade.
No.
Friend.
Yes,
Okay, so that was.
passes
4-2.
4-2. Thank you, Mr. Werfel. Good luck on your project. Okay, with that, we will move on to Manor Costerison. Steve Krnovic. Got it on the second try, Steve. Is here with us tonight.
People don't get it right after 20 years, or 30 years.
So Steve has helped us out with our audit prep a couple weeks ago. We've gone through our audit. He was here today doing the reconciliations and wanted to go over a few things with us.
Great, and you should also have 2 packets, landscape packets on your tables, but just kind of some general comments similar to what Beth had said. I mean, kind of highlights of the last, I think it's been at least a quarter, maybe even 6 months since I've been in front of you. So, but mainly over the last, since the last time I was in front of you, bank recs have been the big push, and actually, I think December through February, we did those remotely. So we have a computer now that we can access remotely, which the township purchased, and that has saved a substantial amount of time on our part and dollars on the township's part. So I think computers paid for itself already, and so that was a real good deal for all of us, and so that was positive. And as Beth mentioned also, audit prep, that was a big push over the last couple months. We worked diligently with your elected officials to get everything ready for the audit, which took place last week. And kind of a no news is good news. They didn't have a lot of questions, so that's always positive when we don't get a lot of questions from the auditors. Maybe 3 to 5 questions I had last week, and so I think we think we got them everything that they needed in the forefront. Had a few clarification questions, and I know they hit Sue and Tracy up for probably a lot more than they hit me up, but they got everything that they needed, I think, and so I don't know if they have given any kind of dates of when.
So they'll be presenting in June,
Okay.
is
And I
what my
think that's about when they
recollection
did
is.
last year, maybe
It is when they
July,
did.
so-
June
Yeah.
30th,
Yeah.
they have to have everything in
Yes,
by.
has to be submitted, so by June 30. So I think that's kind of that's the plan. So I think everything went, well, as far as the audit process goes and so forth. So if you'll look at the two packets that I gave you, the first one was December 31st, revenues and expenditure report for East Bay Township, period ended December 31st, 2021. So just, I'll touch on some totals, because I know you got a lot going on your agenda. But if you look on that December 31st, 2021 landscape, it's 26 pages. But if you look there on the first page, almost halfway down, total revenues for the general fund, $1,872,000. Comparing that as you work across, so total revenues, you were over budget in revenues, which is a good way to be, that $160,000 there as you continue over to the next column. The main area that shows, or is the reason for that increase, or that overage, is state revenue sharing. If you go up the little two that you'll see on the page there, and that was described. I know Beth put a very detailed email together on March 9th that I believe all the board members received. So, and that number is spot on with what Beth had estimated at that point in time. So, so that, as you can see, that revenue was over based on the estimates back a year and a half ago that you put together with your 2021 budget. So revenues and the revenue sharing was over by that $208,000.
And I will mention to the board, one of the things that we're watching in detail is that cable franchise fee. And we're seeing that number slowly go down. They have done some rate adjustments, so we'll see what happens. I think COVID also affected that number as people changed up their viewing options too. So, but we'll keep an eye on it. There's not much we can do we've gotten the best contract we can out of them, coordinating with all the other local units, so.
The thing is, I think that people take and they can download that off their computer and watch TV without full cable.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think has an impact on that. So, so that's revenues for the general fund. I'm going to roll into the document to page 7, and then we'll kind of roll backwards. But just to kind of show you the bottom line, if you go to page 7 of 26. Here you have the bottom line of expenditures for the general fund. Final budget, that little over $2 million, that $2,062,000. Total expenditures was that $1,811,000. So you were under budget. So over budget in revenues, under budget in expenditures. So both positive ways that you want to be for revenues and expenditures of that $251,000 for the year ended December 31st, 2021. To look at some of the reasons for that. So that was, I guess, to go back to that number, that was about a 12% under budget. So again, a positive way to be. If you roll back up to page 2, we'll touch on 5 or 6 areas of where those reductions were, or where those under budget amounts fell. Under elections on page 2, about a quarter of the way down, like that kind of that second section. Not much in elections, thankfully, in 2021, since 2020 was heavy, but you see there, you're under budget for elections, $26,426. So that was one of the first areas.
And we budget for a possible election, but there weren't any. Right. Mindy, go ahead.
So this election reimbursement back on page 1, the $6,400, was that from the year before,
It was
or?
from the state. It just took that long
Okay.
for it to be
Accrued.
correct.
All right, thank you.
So going to page 3, Township Hall at the bottom of page 3. As you see, budgeted 256, actual was 223,000. So there, as you look at that, what we call department or activity, some of the areas, larger areas that were under budget, the receptionist position was vacant for a part of the year, so almost $6,700 there. Our services came in a little bit under there, about 3,000. And then as you continue on down towards the bottom, some of the capital outlay lines, we were about almost 15,000 under in those last 3 areas there of capital outlay that didn't incur those expenditures in the 2021 fiscal year. So those make up a majority of that $33,000 under budget. Rolling to the next section, medical insurance was under budget there at the top with a little 6 by it. The total employee benefits were under about almost 19,000 at 18,500. So just under budget due to under the medical insurance was lower in budget compared to actual.
And that's due to personnel changes.
Excuse me.
Yeah, you're at the will of hiring and vacant positions and so forth. So continuing on to page 5, there's a couple items here, number 7 and number 8. The Bay Shore plan, they're kind of on the center of the page at the 7.
And that was a match for a grant that we didn't do.
Yep. So that's under, under budget, about almost 32,000. So that was an underage of budget usage, so that's good. And then Parks Commission, as you can see there also, you budget an amount for attorneys, engineers, grants, and so forth, and that was the biggest chunk that was the component of that activity that was under budget for Parks Commission at 21,000. And then the only other part that kind of makes up the majority of it is flip one more page to page 6, buildings and grounds. Again, capital outlay related. As you can see there, the little number 9, you had budgeted that, that 30,000 for capital outlay that didn't happen. I don't remember exactly what that was budgeted for.
I'm trying to remember. I think that was the retaining wall.
Could be. I know that's been something.
And the Conservation District is looking at giving us a price on that too, so.
All right. So that was a majority of that 37,000 under budget there. So that was the general fund. As you scroll through, you go to continuing on to page 10. I'll just touch on a couple numbers there in the ambulance. And here you see page 10. Total revenues, almost 98% total revenues there, and the one area that was under budget was that, as you can see, the grant revenue, the little number 10, that was the public safety, public health payroll reimbursement dollars that came in at 15,000, so a little less than what was actually budgeted. So revenues were slightly under. 760 was budgeted and 741 was expended. But also, as you continue on down into the expenditures were slightly over on the ambulance side. If you look at the bottom line there, 731,000 was budgeted, approximately 750 was expended, so about 2%, over budget. You see the 102.67. So mainly overtime. As you can see there in the ambulance, overtime budgeted at 92 and expended of 102. And then continuing on down, they were kind of the flip side of medical insurance expenditures, where medical insurance expenditures were a little bit more. As you continue on down there, you see medical insurance at 78,000 budgeted and actual expenditures of 85,000. So that's kind of budget to actual for, 2 of the larger funds with the ambulance. The only thing I'll point you to is if you'll go to page, I forgot to write a page number down, but if you'll go to page 16, yes. And so pages 16 and 17 are your water and sewer funds. So these are full accrual funds, so you don't have a budget. Generally accepted accounting principles don't require you to adopt a budget for your enterprise fund. So as you can see, there's a couple straggler numbers in there, but there is, no specific budget required for revenues and expenditures of the water and sewer funds. So, so as you can see here, kind of the bottom lines on if you have pages 16 and 17, kind of laying side by side or end to end, total revenues over expenditures for the sewer fund. That bottom line, 345,000 revenues over expenditures, and then continuing on down to the sewer fund, revenues over expenses of that bottom line of 891,000. So, so both those funds, again, are looked at like a business. So their revenues over expenditures, you had, net income of those dollar amounts. But one thing to kind of keep in mind is what happens in those funds as of December 31st is anything that was capitalizable. So you expended quite a bit of dollars, quite a few dollars on the Hammond Road project. I think it was $640,000 roughly. Those costs, you expended those dollars went out, but they get capitalized and put on your capital asset listing and then depreciated over the life of the life of the project. So you look at that and like I said, that's dollars went out for that, but that goes on your books as an asset and then depreciated over the useful life of those assets. So while you see revenues, and over expenditures there, that's something to keep in mind because as you can see on there, one of the things you don't see throughout the year is depreciation expense. So if you look on both of those, sewer and water, you see depreciation expense. That's the expenditures of those assets over their useful lives. So it's a little bit unique on the water and sewer funds compared to, what you might see in the general fund or in the ambulance fund and that type of thing. So that's December 31st, 2021. Should be, I don't think the auditors had any entries as far as I know.
They have not.
So I would envision these being the numbers that you'll see. Obviously, probably a little more easier to read format than that, but you'll see it in the bound audit report for December 31st, 2021. And then the only other one I'll take you to is that other one was a March 31st, so the quarter that just ended March 31st, 2022. And pretty consistent. I won't go through a lot of detail here, but again, looking at that one, that's same report, revenue and expenditure report for the first quarter of the year. So we're kind of looking for that benchmark of 25%, and so as you look there at revenues and expenditure report. The kind of the unique part of this is you've gotten all your property tax revenue, and so you see all of those at the very top. You had 101%, so you've collected all your property taxes, and now you'll expend them. So that's kind of the unique part of that. You're at 23%, that circled number there on that first page. Total revenues are 23%. Looking at them compared to 25. And this is where a lot of those adjustments we talked about. You received a payment, state revenue sharing payment in February, but that gets recorded back to the 2021 fiscal year. You receive some cable franchise fees, like Beth mentioned, that gets recorded back into the prior year. So there's some of those as you look at there's, when you think, gosh, we don't have much revenue coming in. I mean, that's a lot of that, those first couple months of the year get recorded back into the prior fiscal year. So that's kind of that analysis. As you scroll through there, and looking at those, again, using that 25% as your benchmark. Township boards, pretty close on that benchmark. Supervisor is close. Elections, nothing yet. So I mean, you had a few things, but no actual elections yet. So not much as far as expenditures go. There in elections, assessors kind of the same way. You haven't gotten any contractual invoices from them yet, so that's at a very small percentage. Clerk is right on at 23%. Continuing on, treasurer is right at about 23%. Township hall, again, you haven't incurred those. If you look at those bigger ticket items at the bottom of that 265 activity, you're only at 7% there, but those capital outlay expenditures have not happened. Also, that position is vacant there at the very top. Receptionist position is vacant at this point as of March 31st. So all of those combined, show that not much has been expended in that area. The next section is the employee benefits, kind of ends on page 4, but the actual details are on page 3. So the one that labeled D, and what you'll see there is that medical insurance is kind of skewing that a little bit, because as of March 31st, you have January, February, March, and April's payment in there, because you have to pay it ahead of time. January's got paid in January, but April's got paid in March, so you've got 4 months in those 3 months. So that's why that looks a little bit off there, but it's right on track where it should be.
And Steve, moving on to the 410, planning and zoning will be skewed a little bit from our blight enforcement expenses that are in there.
That's exactly, yep. So yeah, that's over, but yeah, in that line that's called contract services, that's where that blight cleanup costs are at, so. Everything else continuing on, planning commission right about, 24%. Continuing to page 5, planning and zoning department, 23%, so again, those are right on. Parks Commission, just not as much, happens in the first quarter of the year, so that's only at, almost 4%. So a lot of, you got that large project in there for the lake and so forth hasn't gotten underway until March 31st.
I have a question.
Yes.
On Parks Commission, there's an 801.000 for attorneys, and there's an 801.001 for attorneys.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why it's like that. That'll be corrected when we go through the chart of accounts. And then we have, though, divvied that out to that 6942. Actually, I believe that one's an error and needs to go into the line item below it, into the 001.
Right, 'cause
I think
then
it's
that
just a
would be-
miscoding.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because most of the expenses through the Parks Commission have been the pre-construction engineering for Arbutus. And we've just have gotten that information to turn into the DNR trust fund right now. So most of that pre-construction engineering's over, and that substantial expenses in there.
Okay, so
And I think it was just an error in not putting the .001 after it.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
Going on to page 6, just a couple to point out here. Buildings and grounds, again, the wages are down in that section, or under budget. So that's the main reason for, and then there's also several, as you can see there, capital outlay, again, just hasn't happened yet. So it's just more of a timing thing there. That's the hard part about the first quarter. It's you think it's actually, quarter of the year, but it's not as much has happened, because a lot of things get put back. And
Well, it'll be nice too when we move those capital expenditures over into a separate fund, because then this will be truly your operational budget, and you'll be able to track that easier.
And then the last one to point out there is about the center of the page, insurance. So that's paid on an annual basis, so that's why that, looks, it says 86%, but you'll have,
Twice.
yeah, okay. And
It's one payment, and then they come out and they do the audit. It's
like a
workers' comp.
supplemental payment
It's
or whatever
workers'
gets caught up. So a vast majority of your payment has been made. That's why, you're at almost 87% of insurance. So, so that's why that looks a little, skewed there. But, the bottom line there on page 6, as you can see, again, revenues at 23% and expenditures at almost 16%, again, because of a lot of those budgeted amounts that you budgeted just haven't been incurred yet. So, and that was, let's see, and then ambulance, it should be in your packet too, it's page 10. Again, that one, property tax revenue is at 101%, just like the general fund, so that's kind of, skews that number to show 88% of your total revenues have been collected, but it's vast majority of that is property taxes. And then run revenue is up, actually, comparative to budget. You're at 36% there. But again, expenditures towards the bottom, you're at 24% of ambulance expenditures. So again, right at that benchmark of 25%. So.
Does anybody have any questions for Steve? Just two things to keep in mind when you're thinking about that fiscal year 2021 is, remember, we had those expenses for the roundabout in there for the surface. So, and that was, we did a budget amendment for that. So I'm happy with those numbers given that, and the fact that we financed Lynn's End out of there, and we didn't know about that at the beginning of the year. So that's not bad. Okay.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
I
if
think
we'll
that
go-
was all that, I mean, I had in particular, I didn't know if.
Yeah, I just wanted to update you guys with respect to ARPA. I was at the Michigan Government Finance Officers Association, the spring seminar that they have, and of course, a lot of information has been coming out about ARPA, the final rule, and so there's been a lot of webinars and workshops, but that meeting at the spring workshop was particularly helpful. And just the overview sheet for this agenda item just refreshes your memory as to when we spoke about it in February and what we were looking at doing. And then I wanted to let you know some of the things that were talked about at that MGFOA seminar. And then I spoke with Steve about it, and I also talked with Raymond. So as you'll recall, number one, we want to try, any local government wants to try to avoid a single audit on top of their regular fiscal audit. And when you need a single audit is if you spend over $750,000 in federal funds. And it doesn't have to be just on one project, it's the accumulation of all of the federal funds. So we want to aim to keep that down. I've only checked one time to see the potential cost of a single audit, but I remember it being like $15,000 to $20,000 or something.
To layer it on top, yeah, probably 10, and at least 10.
Okay, so it's worth trying to make sure that we're able to avoid that. And it's not as if we're avoiding an audit for avoiding the looking at those finances. That will be done with our regular fiscal audit. The other thing is we elected to, as pretty much anyone that I know in another local unit of government has done, is to take the standard revenue allowance for the $10 million, and we did that as well, so that we don't have to go through the calculation. We did go through the calculation, but it's to the benefit to take the standard revenue allowance, and all that means is it's just a calculation. Well, the first one's a calculation, and this is just similar to your taxes. They're going to give you the standard amount and you can claim it. Makes it a whole lot easier for a lot of smaller local units of government. And then with that, of course, you can, as you all well know, place your expenditures in like 4 different buckets, everybody tends to call them. But one of the ones suggested at that spring seminar was with local units, what we're seeing a lot of people do, and I think there's some merit to this, is for local units to be able to take that and their allocation and use that as their under general governmental expenditures. So instead of allocating it specifically for the water or sewer, it can be used for that, but what can be done is that it is used for general expenditures, and then the funding that went for those general expenditures, which would be your state revenue sharing and all of those revenues that Steve just went over, they actually roll into your fund balance. And what that would do for this township is we haven't reallocated our general fund balance in quite some time. So some of those things are allocated administratively or those types of things from long periods of time ago. And so that's one thing that we needed to do, is to take a look at that. This would allow us to look at those funds as well as the ARPA funds all at one time. The real thing that allocation would do, would release the 2024 date and the 2026 date. As you know, there's a 2024 you need to allocate by, and 2026 that you need to spend the funding by, which seems really far out there until you think that the Arbutus project that we're just finishing the pre-construction engineering on was actually a grant that was allocated in 2021. It takes some time to get these things going. So with that, we would be able to do that. Again, I would recommend that we keep that under 750 and not just a little bit, but by a significant amount. Because of the timing, we're at about 1.2 million, so that could be broken up into 3 years. So, about 400,000 each year, or we could do 2 years of about 600,000. I did double check with our accountant and Raymond that none of the, what I was thinking, okay, make sure that these aren't federal funds, your revenue in your ambulance, so your.
Sort of run charge, like Medicaid, Medicare.
Exactly. Doesn't count for that, so that would not add to that, getting up to that 750. So at 600,000 a year, we would avoid that single audit. We don't have another 150 that comes from federal sources. Any of the COVID funding, I believe, predates that. So anyway, so that is an option that is available to the township. I think we discussed it just a little bit at the MTA luncheon last week. And again, that was a topic of discussion with one of the presenters at the finance workshop, and then again, checked with Steve to make sure that that was, you have a couple other clients that are doing that. And when I checked with Steve Peacock, he felt that that was fine, but he wanted to run that up the flagpole with their ARPA experts who are taking the uber deep dive into the funds. And he called me back and said he absolutely did. He checked with a couple, and that's not a problem. He said when they do the audit, they go through, it's pretty general reporting that you have to do. And he said they would go through, document those, and that would just be in the audit itself, not any special audit. So with that, does anyone have any questions? Again, we can still stay on the same timeline that we talked about that's at the top of the agenda item overview. And just for the public's knowledge, that's requesting projects through June, and I suggest changing that to July because we'll kind of line up with the budgeting process from our departments. And then through the fall, looking at categorizing the expenditures into some general framework, and then getting public input on those categories of projects at the end of the year, and then the beginning of next year, making some decisions on those projects. My intent, and I believe it should be this board's intent, would, regardless of how those funds are allocated, is to make that commitment that that 1.2 in total does get spent on benefits or resources or to the community, whether that's parks or water or sewer, it doesn't matter, but of value to the community. Let's see, I was trying to think if there was something else I was going to add to that real quick. Yes, the MTA, Grand Traverse County, and Networks Northwest, who was there on behalf of the Grand Traverse County Community Regional Foundation, went over their ARPA process last week, and this lines up pretty good with their ARPA process. They're looking at taking applications for projects the end of the summer. So we would be able to tie in our projects to that as well. And again, like, take a holistic look at all of those general fund balances and reallocate them as we would like to with public input. And that ties in with the chart of accounts as well. So, any questions? Mindy, go ahead.
Is this supposed to be a 3 or a 4?
4:30. I'm not sure which number. Where are you at? 1, 2?
Scenarios,
They have the same date.
Oh, yes. No. The scenario will add a reporting date. Yes. So 3 on the second one. So we could do the 600,000. So the report has to, our first report has to be done by the end of this month, by April 30th, and then a year from that date. Because of, we're an NEU, because of our, we're a smaller local unit of government, some are required to do quarterly reporting, say the county and so forth. We're not. And so we would report on April 30th of 2022, use of half of the funds, and then a year later, we would do the same thing. Now, you could do that in 2022 and 2023, or we could claim no use of the funds right now and do that as it's itemized under number 2, claiming half of those funds in 2023 and then in 2024. And that would also fit the reporting requirements. The other option would be, as I mentioned earlier, to split that up into thirds. Go ahead.
So can we put that money into an interest-bearing account?
It is already.
While we wait for it to?
Yep.
It is.
It already
However,
is.
interest
Is-
is not bearing much.
Right.
So
Right.
Steve and I had that discussion today.
And you can use the interest on that for anything,
Correct.
however little it is.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's very little.
Yeah. I guess, in looking back on this, probably my recommendation would be this allows the township to have a lot more latitude in the timing of their decisions that may be more appropriate given projects. But I would I don't see the reason why we wouldn't break it up into 3 reporting requirements into over 3 years. So a third in 2022, a third next year, and third the next.
Does the grant that we got for the trails have impact on to getting to the 750?
The grant from TART? No, because, that's under TART. That's an allocation that's an earmark from Bergman's office, the 900,000.
Okay, I thought we were part.
We are an applicant with them on another grant. However, we won't know the status of that, and, I think that one's
So that's
not
my
quite as hopeful.
concern, is that maybe it's the Safe Routes to School grant?
You know,
We get that grant, are we gonna pop over that 750?
That was part of my question too, and so I'm thinking the lower amount, if we split it into 3, would be better, so that if we do get a federal grant,
Yeah.
that we have a little leeway.
or to front load it, to take the maximum this year, because any of those grants would come later.
22.
And so it would give you more gap spacing at the later date.
So we could front load this year and then split the rest in 2 years?
But I think it's possible the Safe Routes to School is considered state funding. Do you know?
I'm not sure if does it come through the trust fund, the DNR trust fund?
No.
Then that, a lot of times that money sometimes is federal,
Okay.
the Safe Route Schools, but I mean, it just really depends on where it originates, even though it might come from the state to
Yeah.
you, it might originate.
And I don't know what
Yep.
they're doing with that.
I don't know
So
right off the-
probably given that, to look, that definitely is a later funding date than 2022. So to be the safest, we would probably want to take closer to the maximum, say maybe 650 or 7 in this year, because that relates to last year. We know we don't have that federal funding from March of last year. I think they're going from March 1st
March, yes,
to April, to
March 31st.
March 31st, right. Does anyone have any questions on that?
I think I would prefer to, let me ask this, and I think I know the answer, but can we front load the 650 for 2022 and then split the remainder 650
Yeah, we don't have
into
to,
23 and 24, so it would be even lower?
and we don't have to make that decision tonight.
Tonight? Okay.
We could the only decision I need tonight is to know what to claim on that April 30th reporting, so when I go through and put it in. And I will add a caveat to that, because it is the federal government, and they are going for the interim final rule to the final rule, so there is a little bit of flexibility. The accountant that I spoke with at the spring workshop said, actually, he said, if you don't claim any, and then you choose to claim any, you can file an amended report. And he said they have voiced that, and I don't want to do that. That would not be my preference. But just to let you know that he did mention that. He said they are being extremely user-friendly with this because they know that this is new to everybody and a lot are in different situations.
Well, and from what I understand on the listservs, they're having a really hard time getting logged into the system.
Okay.
Multiple people are getting no help.
Okay.
So logging in has been like weeks trying to get it figured out.
And I don't know, I did all of the initial logging in and submission of the information and making sure that we have the UEI number
Yeah.
instead of the DUNS number. So far, that's gone okay, but we'll see on the rest of it. I may be working on nothing else until April 30th, apparently.
Well, I wouldn't leave it till the 28th.
Okay,
That's
sounds
what I'm
good.
saying.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Part of that, I mean, if it's, because it starts March 30, or March 1st, 2021 to March 31st, 2022, if there was some of that you wanted to, I mean, we could theoretically have some of it in 2021 if we wanted to. I mean, I know it's a little bit late in the game, but we could have an entry for 2021 if that's, I mean, that's
Yeah,
food for thought. But I mean, because some of those costs are in 2021.
well, actually, a lot of them would be.
You
We
have
don't,
that first quarter in 2022.
to absorb that much.
Right.
We
But then
don't.
you'd have the next reporting in March of 2023.
Yeah,
that
but-
would cover the rest.
Yeah, but we want to narrow that, we want to maximize that gap there, just in case of the
But
federal
your single lot
funds.
threshold would be over the calendar year. So-
Okay. Okay. So we'll juggle all of those things together.
Wait,
Yeah,
I just got really confused.
Yeah, so the reporting mechanism is March 1st through March 31st, 21 to 22, and I have to have the report in by April 30th. However, the fiscal single audit he's talking about is $750,000 spent in a calendar year, in our fiscal year.
So does it go back to 2021 then? Even though we're reporting through March 31st of 2022?
Well, right now, there's nothing of the ARPA dollars was recognized in 2021.
But we can file, I mean, they're letting us file for that. We can put $600,000 or $650,000 of that in 21 expenses.
Even though we received it in 2022?
Because it was for expenses that you had for the prior year.
But you got the first tranche.
Possibly.
Right. We got the first tranche in '21, yeah, in October.
Yep.
If we do something like that, does there have to be a note in our audit with our auditor?
I would probably, if you decide that you're going to utilize some costs for 2021, it sure would be nice to line those up, and before the audit gets issued, and if you decide we're going to do 500,000 of general government operations, and we should probably do an entry in, and provide it to the auditors to recognize that revenue, because you've got it, it's sitting in unearned revenue right now, so we would want to recognize that, and
I can tell you that when Steve Peacock took that to he ran that by 2 or 3 people. And he said, you don't have an issue with claiming that. And he did say, with your audit, and I guess I didn't clarify with him whether he meant fiscal year 21 or 22, but he said, with your audit, we would just take a look at what your expenditures are, what you allocated them to. And mind you, they don't go down to, while we may have to produce all that information, they categorize it very simply. So they look at, you spent this much in general fund or whatever. But he said they would just note that on the audit, and that would not be an issue.
I guess from my point of view is I would rather we not touch 2021 now that they're done with the field work of the audit. I would be more inclined to say, let's take the 650 for 2022 and then split the other portion over the next 2 years afterwards.
And
I
we,
really want to be able to have our facilitator and get the input on what is best serving our community.
yeah, and that's why the dates help us a lot.
you'd go 23, 22, 23, and 24, and that would get you, I mean, you could split it over those 3, years. The reporting is different, and the reporting period is different, just because it doesn't line up perfectly with your December 31st year end, so, you'd report it a little bit different, but you'd still get expended within 22, 23.
Mindy?
So when you say 2022, is that April 1st, 2022 through March 31st, 2023?
That'd be your calendar year of 22,
Yeah.
January through December, but it's reported differently because the reporting is March to March, the first one.
Okay.
Yeah. I think what we can do, because I did get the sense from Peacock that it wasn't an issue with relation to the audits. We could potentially just say, listen, we'll take this much from March of '21 to March of '22, and then make any further decision for the other years later, subject to the verification from Raymond that it doesn't add any obstacles for the fiscal year '21 audit. And I would just clarify that with them this week and communicate that with Steve. And if that's the case, that's what we'll do. And then if not, the subsequent would be to then plan on doing that maximum amount for the next reporting mechanism that goes for that calendar year. But I think we should give ourselves every opportunity, not knowing when those other dollars will hit with the other grants.
And then you can utilize and modify, put constraints on your fund balance, however you want to do that, no matter how you recognize the ARPA dollars.
Right.
And then you can still say, okay, we know we're getting that 1.2. We're going to better things within the community of $1.2 million. We're going to expend the ARPA dollars on general government operations and then utilize those dollars that you freed up by paying for general government operations, your general dollars, like Beth said, property taxes, state revenue sharing, that type of thing. And then the constraints aren't on there that the federal government's putting on the ARPA dollars.
So if there's no more questions or comments, I'll try and take a stab at a motion
Can I just ask, to me, because we haven't had any discussions of a facilitating or anything, what's the hurry to put it back to 2021?
Because we don't know when the federal funds are going to come, and we have to allocate it by 2024. So if we don't do any to 2021, it leaves us with 2 years instead of 3 years. And so that's some significant funding with Safe Routes to School. That's $1 million in funding right there. And so it just helps us guard against spending the money on a single audit. I'm not guaranteeing it, but I do think it would be our best measure to try not to.
Safe Routes to School, that
Safe
$1
Routes to School.
million could even give you an audit.
It could. Like I said, I will, I think, I think that this what's that?
It could cause a problem with all of it if that comes.
It's possible, but that doesn't impact our decision on the April 30th filing. That would impact our decision.
Amendment if it happened in 2022, if the Safe Routes to School money came in 2022.
Well, only a portion of that 600 would be allocated to 2022.
Right.
So probably not. But if that Safe Routes to School money is federal, and it does come down through the feds, but I don't know if that runs through the state or what's that counted as from an audit perspective.
Are you part of you said you're part of the grant agreement, so you would be a subrecipient, or we're not sure?
On the Safe Routes to School, that's actually, oh, wait a second. This is a moot point. We're not the grant applicant, it's the Act 51 agency. Don't worry about it. It's the road commission.
Oh, so it would, yeah,
So then it won't run through us at all?
We're just acting collaboratively with them. Matter of fact, we just had to do some quarterly reporting that they have to file.
you're not the
So,
subrecipient, then
yeah.
it would fall on your
So let's think, is there anything else? No, the TART trail, again, that 900,000 is an earmark that's going to TART, so that's not an issue. The only other thing is the EDA grant that the TART is going to, we were the applicant for that. The chances of us getting that are like this. They only opened it to tourism for the first time this year. And we had a meeting with them about 3 weeks ago on a Zoom call on a Friday at 8 in the morning when I woke up at 7:45. That was a fun Zoom call. But what I do recall is that they had overwhelming applications. So if that tells you something.
And how much was that one?
Oh, it was several hundred thousand. I can't recall.
I think it was 4.
Yeah, that seems about right. I was thinking 3, but I know they were looking for quite a bit in funding there, so it could have been the whole 9, I don't recall. But, yeah.
Do we have to make a decision tonight on how we break it up, or just that we're going to do it from 2022 to 2024, 2025?
Yeah, we don't have to make that decision. We just have to make a decision from 21 to 22 for the April reporting. So, and it sounds like we have very little exposure from any federal funds, or minimal.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, back, I don't know, that was in 20, like that public safety, public health, was that in, I don't remember if that, I don't know, it's been so long since I've looked at this. Was that in December, or was that in the March report? That's federal, and that is subject to single audit, but I think that was in.
That's well below the
But I mean,
100,000.
you include that in,
Yep.
in your calculation,
Yeah.
so.
That's why we're looking at the 650 instead of the 750
Right, yeah.
number,
Any
though.
kind of those grants that,
Yeah.
that come up,
So the hazard
that was in
pay that we
2021.
paid
But,
on
yeah,
ambulance personnel.
so, yeah, so
Yep.
any of
That
that
was the
came in
36.
2020.
But we weren't close to 100,000 with that.
Okay, but those are the types of grants that you'd include in
Yeah.
the analysis to determine if you're at 750.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I would move to, let me just make sure I get everything in here. I would move that on the American Rescue Plan Act reporting for 4/30/2022, that we allocate $600,000 of the ARPA funds in general government expenditures during that time period of March 2021 through March or April 1st of 2022. Let's leave the dates off that and just say for the 2022 report. It is for the 4/30/2022 reporting, but for the previous year of that reporting, we would allocate $600,000 in general government expenditures.
I would support that.
Okay. Motion by Friend, supported by Bartlett. Is there further discussion or questions? Go ahead, Mindy.
So confused, and I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
know you keep explaining it to me, and I
It's
get it,
okay.
and then I lose it. So for that date, does that have to go to the current audit?
I think we were going to mention, we were going to condition it on that, correct?
I mean, you could check, looking at your I'm just gonna throw another.
So I'm not gonna yes or no?
But but general fund expenditures for March 31st, 2022 were 415,000. And ambulance was 227,000, so we're at 6.
We're not going to do it in those general fund, in the 210s or anything.
Okay, so you're at about 410 and 415, whatever I just said, in expenditures in the general fund, if you're trying to line it up
With 2022?
with 2022, as of March 31st.
400,000?
400 and, whatever I just said, 15, 400?
Okay.
415, 870, 176.
Yes, ma'am.
Does anyone have an issue if I restate the motion amended? Okay, then we'll do that. So I would move to, upon verification that it does not complicate the fiscal year 2021 audit, that we would allocate $600,000 on the April 30th, 2022 ARPA reporting for the previous year for $600,000. Should that affect, if that affects the fiscal year 2021 audit, then we will allocate $375,000. I'm just going to drop it down in case we have some numbers. Then we would allocate $375,000 on the April 30th, 2022 ARPA funding for general government expenditures during the 2022 fiscal year. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because
Yeah.
you could, in theory, that first quarter of the year, if you said 375,000, then you've got 9 months left of your calendar year of 2022. So you could do 600, you know.
Yeah.
But that's going to be an extra reporting.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, nope, that works.
So if $600,000 may complicate the 2021 audit, why wouldn't 300 and whatever you said?
75, because it's only on the 2022 fiscal year.
Okay, so it's if this doesn't work, then we're doing this.
Correct. If the $600,000, which is partially in year 2021, complicates the audit, we won't do that. We'll change the amount to 375 and put it for the 2022 fiscal year. They will all hit the April 30th reporting requirement for ARPA.
Did you get support yet?
Yes.
Is there support? Okay. Motion by Friend, supported by Bartlett. Any further questions? Go ahead, Mindy.
Is a 2% grant federal?
No. It's tribal.
No, that's tribal.
Tribal dollars, no.
Okay, Ann, we'll do a roll call vote.
Sure. Friend.
Yes.
Bartlett.
Yes.
Walters.
Yes.
Lyle.
Yes.
S. Cortade.
No.
M. Cortade.
No.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much for your consideration. And Steve, thank you very much for being here today and for all the work preparing for the audit.
Yes, thank you.
Very much appreciated. We'll be in touch with you on this.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
This was a resolution.
To read the end of the resolution.
You did a resolution.
I did a resolution. Let's keep that motion because it's very clear. And I don't think we need a resolution. The only reason I did a resolution was because it came through the listserv. So I don't know that, I think a motion is fine. I haven't heard of a resolution being required.
I don't know what the
I think
reporting
through
looks
the
like.
clerk's forum, they were asking if anyone had any resolutions.
I just sent you that because it came through the
Right.
treasurer's listserv is all.
Right. Okay, well, we can do this as a resolution with 2022-06, and it will be resolved that the township establishes $600,000 of the total ARPA allocation to the township will be utilized for the general funded expenditures as allowed per the final rules from the time period of March 21 through the 4/30/22 reporting date. If there are no complications with the fiscal year 2021 audit, and number two, if there is such a complication, the township establishes $375,000 of the total ARPA allocation to the township will be utilized per the general fund expenditures as allowed per the final rules from the time period of March 21 through the 4/30/2022 reporting date. Basically, same thing. Okay, so I would move to approve Resolution 2022-06 as stated.
Support.
Okay, motion made by Friend, supported by Bartlett. Further discussion? Roll call vote. Thank you for reminding me that was
Friend.
in there. Yes.
Bartlett.
Yes.
Lyle.
Yes.
S. Cortade.
No.
M. Cortade.
No.
Walters.
Yes.
I think that's it, right?
Very good, thank you. Okay, with that, we will move on to Grand Traverse County Equalization and East Bay Township Assessing Department. And now we get to sit back and not make decisions and hear some of the great things that the Assessing Department is doing. So Jim Baker is here, who is our Equalization Director and Assessor of Record for East Bay Township, along with Susan Carricos, and our new assessor, Darren Darge, who has just started with us in the past month, correct? What was your start date? Has it been longer than that?
Beginning of March.
Beginning of March, okay. Very good. Thank you. Come on up and sit down. Susan, come on up and sit down. I know Susan. Susan likes her computer better than board meetings. We get that. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Good, and I can understand how she feels. No, good evening, everybody, and it is really hard for me to believe that I've been here for 10 March board reviews now.
Wow.
Yeah, and I admit it was kind of intimidating when I first come up to Grand Traverse County and I became the Equalization Director and the Assessor of Record for East Bay. And it was the diversity of the region that made it difficult to determine assessment levels. You had so many facets of the region. And what I found interesting in being the County Equalization Director and the Assessor of Record for East Bay Township is that the two areas are very similar to each other. Whatever Grand Traverse County has, East Bay has it too, in the diversity as far as like Lake Michigan waterfronts for residential, commercial, inland lakes, rivers. You have the urban, rural, agriculture, state land, railroads. I mean, everything the county has, you have it. And so it was, when I finally got a grasp on the county and East Bay Township, it seems like everything else kind of fell in line for me. I appreciate the support at the Board of Review that Beth gives us as supervisor, and I appreciate the members that are appointed to the Board of Review. And we have seen an 8.24% increase in assessed value this year, and it'll be a 7.73% increase in taxable value. Those are big numbers, the biggest numbers I've reported. The caveat there is I've run a preliminary rollback fraction, and it's not pretty, so some of that will be clawed back. And I would bet that it would be about 2.5%, maybe clawed back off of your millage of last year. So more accurate numbers to come as I finish up those calculations. So East Bay is the fourth largest unit behind Traverse City, Garfield, Peninsula. So it stands out as one of the leading townships in the county. I appreciate the working relationship that I had first with Glenn. He was always finer than frog hair. And now Beth. And I appreciate your support as a board. Being fully supported has allowed our assessing team to provide the required multifaceted function of the assessing office. And this has led to 2 AMAR from the state, 2 AMAR checks. It's an audit of minimum assessing requirements. We've been through 2 of them. And tiny minor dings that most townships got, but we came out really well out of those 2. We're soon due for the 3rd one, probably in 2023. And so I really appreciate your support. It's hard to stay ahead of all of the legislative changes and keeping up good assessment practices. I appreciate the pictometry that was flown, and I believe is going to be flown again this year as part of that original contract. And in this process, I've made staffing changes, as Beth alluded to. We brought Darren on, and Joel, he has come back to the county, he's helping me over there, and it was in an effort to provide good succession. Joel and Susan were kind of syncing up on their retirement dreams, so I had to kind of stagger it so that as people hope to stay home, we have a succession plan. So I'll introduce Darren and let him tell a little bit about himself.
Well, I don't have a current retirement plan.
Darren?
Use the mic, Darren.
Pull that mic
Sorry.
over.
I don't have a current retirement plan, but my name's Darren Darge. I am from Oakland County. I've been doing assessing since 2003. Most of my career's been Oakland County for 3 years, but I was in Auburn Hills for a very long time, doing a lot of the commercial, and then there was some residential. And then I moved over to Novi to work for the old city manager from Auburn Hills, and he was a current assessor. And he's actually a very big name in assessing in the state of Michigan, Michael Lohmeyer, and I went to go work for him in Novi, it's a very fast pace. It's very crowded down there. And I saw the opportunity to come up here, spoke to Jim for quite a while. I spoke to Beth and decided I'd like to come up here and possibly work out my days up here. I was very pleased when I got here that the township, because I didn't know what I was coming into, but the township the staff is great. It's very organized, and this runs, I don't want to badmouth any other municipality, but this township runs very efficiently on a much smaller staff than what we are used to, or what I'm used to. As Jim said, the diversity is going from up to Munson all the way down to these small lakes, all the rural agriculture, and the building is really, really more than I expected. So I'm really excited, and I know I'm going to be really busy.
And I didn't pay him to say any of that.
I'm pretty much an open book, but no, I was very surprised my first couple of weeks when Susan started giving me the piles of work that's coming in. I think, in my personal opinion, coming from places booming down in Oakland County, especially before the economic downturn, East Bay it's got the location. It's got a low location coming around the city, and it's going to wrap right up, go up towards Torch Lake, and just keep going. So I feel East Bay Township is going to be very busy, and I'm pretty excited to jump into it and stay busy.
And Darren, thank you so much. I, as much as I think you sought to come north, you have your daughter's in college closer to here, and you have family that has a homestead near here. Jim and I and Susan were very excited that he chose to come to this job with Grand Traverse County and work with East Bay Township. He had very, very good recommendations that stood up when Jim spoke with them, and very high praise to things to say. And I can tell you, he fits right in. We usually try to do a little bit of a friendly gag gift, or a friendly prank when a new employee starts, and he just fit right in and rolled with the punches, and so we appreciate that. And we look forward to Susan being here as long as she would like to for her retirement. She's waffling on how many board of reviews there are left for her, but
I'll see if I can get her to stay a little bit longer. And her institutional knowledge is incredible. She pretty much knows everything. Just the knowledge is there. I have a question, and she's right there. Everybody's been right there for any questions that I have. The department included, we work with them. I mean, it's very pleased to see how, and like I said, and I'm not trying to smooth, but it's run very efficiently, and a lot of knowledge, very organized for such. I'm used to a much bigger, really high-paced city type of staff, and this staff is much smaller than what I'm used to working with, but they're probably more efficient. They're if not more efficient than what I'm used to downstate in Oakland County.
appreciate that. I want to thank these three and Joel for the guidance with the tax tribunals that we've had. Am I stealing a little bit of your thunder rolling into that? Okay. So we've had, as you guys all know, you've heard about these along the way, but just to kind of recap them, we had the Olson tax tribunal of 18 and 19. Those were withdrawn. So nothing changed on our end. They just completely withdrew their petition. The Stellar one was stipulated at where we wanted stipulated. So it was our first negotiation was accepted. And DTE, because that's such a large encompassing thing, was really taken out of our hands and done at a statewide level. So that was stipulated, but that was on a broader. Denny's, as Tracy knows, was withdrawn. And Tamarack was a long one. We paid for the appraisal. It was a complicated one. It was an exponential number of tax property IDs because of the timeshare. And they ended up coming back and settling at our initial request. How we get to our initial request is, I've told you guys before, is when we get a tax tribunal in, we don't assume that we're right. We take a look at what they're petitioning and we say, did we miss something? Is there some way that we see that their number's valid? If there is, then we look at making some adjustment. If there isn't, and we're solid on our numbers, then we go to bat. And I'm very, very thankful that you guys have supported this department in doing that, and we have been successful with it. And if there is room to legitimately move, we will offer that, as we did with Tamarack. It was very limited. That was a case that could have really affected all the taxing authorities to a really large extent, and so very worthwhile in doing that. So the two ongoing active ones that we have are Center Ice. As you know, we have, I'll let you guys talk about the Center Ice one a little bit. And then we have Hampton Inn, which is, and we're just on the front beginning part of that.
Well, with Center Ice, that was big way back before my time. It was in Glenn's time. And they wanted to be exempt back then, or were put on the roll, and then they fought being taxable way back then. Well, they actually filed another appeal to be exempt, and it has went through the court systems and has been determined that a like entity wouldn't be exempt, so they withdrew their exemption appeal, but they're still appealing their valuation appeal. Darren and I worked on that. I bet you it was like the day after he got here. He's familiar with some ice rinks downstate. We worked on it together, and what I think we noticed is that when we try to develop an economic condition for property in order to cost modify our, or to sale modify our cost approach, basically we're taking a cost and then taking a general trend of market and trying to modify that cost a little bit. We were comparing the ice rink probably incorrectly to properties that are more Main Street commercial properties. And here we have this big out back, big industrial kind of building, and so we looked at that. We came down a little bit. I looked at what other assessors think their ice rinks are valued at around the state that are similar. I used a list that Russ compiled back a few years ago and followed up on that and saw that we had some room to maybe make an offer. I believe Tom has that offer, and I haven't heard yet anything back. We're hoping they'll stipulate to that. And the Hampton Inn is just brand new and ongoing, but Susan has supplied our attorney several sales that I just don't understand where they're coming from. I'm thinking it feels like it should be a strong case.
And we have, this board has approved the appraisal for Hampton, and so they're going forward with that. So.
That's all I have.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Welcome, Darren. Good to see you both every day. Go ahead.
If you need to know anything about any ice rinks, just let me know.
She hangs around a lot of them.
And all I
She
can say
does.
is make sure you looked at the Summit when you were evaluating Center Ice. Because it's just sold for 1 point something, and it's now a grow facility.
Oh,
Well,
Okay.
and there again.
It's industrial.
Kind of came back off what we decided it should be, is it's kind of an industrial style.
There was the difference in the ECF from commercial to industrial, so it gave them the flexibility there, correct? Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. Really appreciate it. Okay, with that, we'll move on to East Bay Ambulance. Nick Lempool, the director, is here. And in your packet, and this starts on the supplemental packet, page 1, you have the report, and then also an agenda item related to East Bay Ambulance that we were trading in. Go ahead, Nick.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to give a quarterly report on our call volume. The April numbers is of the 6th of this month. You can see that we're up about 14 calls over last year, and we're actually up 53 calls over 2021 so far this year. We have our missed calls are actually going up. We've missed 12 calls. We've only assisted MMR or other areas 10 times, so we've missed 12. They've come and helped us 12 times. We've helped them 9 times, in Paradise once. That's just call volume. I think that's going to change again because as summer grows, they get busier in town. They've been using City Fire more often, and Peninsula actually quite a bit too. So that may change as we go forward. That's pretty much it for our call volume. Any questions on those?
Go ahead, Glenn.
I like the report you got here. The one question I have is, what percentage or how many are transport?
We're about a 60% transport.
60%. Thank you.
And just for the rest of the board, I think you know that, but on non-transports, we do not bill, and on transports, we do bill.
And that doesn't mean that we make our full payment on our transports that we do transport on.
Yeah.
We still make bare minimum on those, based on the insured. Any more questions on that?
So tell us about the East Bay Ambulance.
So the other thing that we wanted to talk about was the potential of keeping our 2012 Lifeline that we talked about trading in originally. So with the supply and demand changes, if we were to order another ambulance today, it'd be 2 years before we would even get it. So with our growth and potentials of staffing changes in the future, we'd like to potentially keep that as we move forward. Just in case something happens where we decide we need to have more staff or whatever else might happen, or an accident happens and we lose an ambulance, we're done for a little bit. So just, it would cost us the $50,000 trade-in value, and we'd just like to continue moving forward with that.
What really changed that decision for us was the fact that we got the Stryker grant from the 2%. So now it only costs $15,000 to keep it versus $15,000 plus the entire cost of a power cut load system.
$50,000 versus $55,000.
Right.
Or whatever it was.
Right. And you might think, well, how often do we have an ambulance down? It does happen. We've just recently had some front-end damage a little bit. That'll be claimed with the insurance and fixed, but it does happen.
So question for you. When is our ordered ambulance coming?
I love that.
Sorry, cart one first.
I was told that it has been started, and they're anticipating June or July.
Okay.
That could change.
When was it originally supposed to be here?
I don't think they ever really gave us a date.
I thought it was early this year.
It was like
It was
February.
December. Original date was December of 2021, but that's when we received the chassis in Florida.
Because the payment was supposed to be last year because we had it in the budget.
It was planned for December, now that you say that.
Okay.
So when that arrives, we will have 3 working rigs.
Correct.
And the vehicle that we've been putting on the budget, trying to get grants for too, so we'll have 4 rescue, potentially. How is it looking when you do your stats to put on another part-time staffing, full-time staffing, so that if these calls happen, we're not missing them? We have the rig, but we need to have the staffing.
And that's part of what Beth and I kind of talk about every time we sit down and talk. We're not to the point where our call volume needs it completely yet, to add a second staff truck during the time, but we're really close. Our issue now is that when we do have a call, we're on call. When we do take a call, we're on a call for at least 50 minutes. Sometimes more, so that's our average call time is 50 minutes. So sometimes it's obviously gonna be more, sometimes it's gonna be less.
Is that barn to barn?
Yeah, that's from dispatch to clear of the hospital. So that doesn't count back in the township, but that's clear of the hospital, which we do respond from the hospital oftentimes. That's when you see our response numbers are higher at those points, is because we're 15 minutes from the hospital.
Doing multiples.
And our mutual aid isn't completely reliable, as we've talked about before. So eventually, it's probably gonna happen where I'm gonna come ask for more staff, or we're gonna have to figure out some other plan to do something.
Some improved mutual aid.
Yeah, because we're level 0. If we're running, 1,000 calls a year and we're on a call for an hour, that's 1,000 hours a year that we're tied up.
But understand, when you are talking about adding a second truck, you are talking about near doubling our budget, because you have to have almost as much staffing as we currently do. I mean, it takes 4 people 4 full-time plus part-time to staff that 24/7, 365 days a year. And so at this point, when you're looking at 12 missed calls, that's a hard justification. We'd really like to work on that mutual aid relationship. Go ahead.
When you're doing the stats, can you look at when it is during the day? I mean, is it when people are awake, or is it when people are sleeping, kind of thing?
It is all over the board.
I know, but if you can start,
Yeah, I have them from 2000. It's hard to track a double call. We've had some issues with our dispatch center on trying to keep track of those on our end for us to be able to track them, but I'm working on that. And I have some numbers that shows us when our busy times are, but I don't have that double hit time yet.
And it runs very similar to the timing of the frequency of the calls as obviously Metro. So,
I guess I want to further this line of conversation. I am for the rigs, but I want to just, do we have on-call? How are we going to get those rigs out of the barn and out and work? Or do we just have, I'm sure they're not just sitting idle, but if we don't have staffing, what purpose are the rigs for?
For the point that if we do get the staffing to do that, if we do get to a point where we say we need to add a second truck, daytime 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., we'll need to have that third truck as a backup.
So do we have on-call
We do
abilities
not have
now?
on-call abilities.
so one of the reasons, to run what we run currently, you have to have 2 trucks. That's what we have now. So the difference that we're really talking about is the extra truck, and then the one that we've been going after through grants. So the extra truck, the real reason to keep it is to add more flexibility, more ability to change based on upcoming needs at a very low cost of $15,000. And given that, I think he mentions in here that it's 2 years to order another vehicle, if there's some change in the service plan, that's a huge lead time. So for a nominal cost of the 15, we increase our flexibility. And as far as the other vehicle, we don't really know quite when we will do that, because we don't know, every time you do a grant, it's a little bit of a crapshoot as to whether you receive funding or not. And so far, that hasn't been super high on the priority listing of the 1 or 2 grants we've put in for it. Was it 2 so far? Or 1? 3? Okay. But there may be some other opportunities for that, either other grant sources that we're looking at, and also, obviously, we've talked about the ARPA funding as well. That vehicle, how that would be serviced and used is by Nick. So right now, he uses personal vehicle if he has to go intercept something, or it would just add more flexibility to hit those other calls that we're missing. So that vehicle could get to that call and then be intercepted by MMR if East Bay Ambulance isn't available yet. Correct, Nick?
For the most part, yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
Are there any extra rigs in our region right now?
There is one that Long Lake uses quite a bit through Blair. That's it. So if we lost 2 trucks today, we would have to ask Blair or scramble to find something else to make something work.
I'm totally in support of keeping it. But my question is can we, I don't know if this is even possible, can we just let our neighbors that if they get in trouble, we're here to help them too?
Yeah.
The one last part is when we do anything additional, particularly like when you had the Boy Scouts request something, or with the Red Wings, it gives another rig and availability. The other thing is too, again, increasing that flexibility of decisions in the future. If we're not using that in 18 to 36 months, we can probably sell it for exactly what we would have gotten for the trade-in. So we're not out anything but some insurance cost.
Well, I envision that we'll be using it and then some. I don't believe your calls are going to go down.
I don't think they are either. I agree.
So I guess that's why I want it to stay on the radar to increase staffing. I think you have a board that is open to that. I think if you were to poll our residents, they want to make sure that a blue rig comes to save them or take care of them. That's why we do what we do. But I don't want us to be behind the 8 ball in doing that recruiting to make sure that we can respond every time and also help our neighbors.
Well, one thing I don't want there to be the misrepresentation or misinterpretation that we're not servicing the calls that are needed. We do have redundancy, and that's the reason we have redundancy. Metro goes on every medical call out there. 70% of their calls are medical calls. So if MMR is somewhat delayed, if we're on a second call, then the Metro is there as well. And that's a reason for that. And Glenn and I have supported their continuing on those medical runs through Metro as well. So that helps as well. Because again, you're looking at, we're at what, about an $800,000 a year budget, and you're probably looking at about $600,000 worth of cost. And you really have to titrate that with what are your redundancies and what is your call volume, and that's what we're always looking at. But I guess with that, I think it sounds like everyone's probably in acceptance of this. I'll just go ahead and move to approve the additional cost of $15,000, which eliminating the trade-in on the new ambulance purchase previously approved March of 2021.
Support.
Okay, motion by Friend, plenty of support. Ann, who would you like to put down?
Sue was next to me.
Okay, and all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by no? Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much, Nick. Have a good evening. Okay, with that, we will move on to the Planning and Zoning Department. Claire, we're here with the quarterly update and then some discussion on short-term rentals. Thank you for your patience.
Hey, good evening. So we're putting together a new template for these quarterly updates, and this is kind of the same template that will feed into the annual report that we put together for Planning Commission each year. So you'll see that's in your packet. So this is for the first 3 months. I was out for the first 2 months of those, so I appreciate the rest of the planning department as well as our staff consultant kind of moving things along in January and February. But you'll see we've got development reviews, so there was 4 site plans that were approved this year. One was the Stellar Hospitality, that's the 2 extended stay hotels and the drive-through retail component, as well as the Alexandra Inn was approved with conditions. That was at the last meeting. The Dairy Queen, that's a special land use permit because it's a drive-through located at the former Ruby Tuesdays, was approved. And then Burger King, that was administrative approval. They were adding an additional drive-through lane, so we just reviewed that administratively. The one that's not on here is GoRec, so that's obviously still pending. That was carried over from 2021, but that's another site plan review that will be, that we'll have a decision on, or action on for this year. Zoning ordinance text amendments, we've just got one in process right now. That's an amendment to allow a combination of different uses in all commercial districts. So right now we have a few commercial districts that allow a combination. So for example, the Stellar allowed a hotel as well as retail on the same site plan. So this would allow a combination of uses in industrial district, for example, as well as the other commercial districts. And this was kind of precipitated. I've had a number of different inquiries from different applicants that are looking for more than one use on either a large site or a more intensive commercial site. This was, PGO's brought this to us and was, interested in having some residential use on their property in addition to their restaurant to make an existing building more viable. So if this is approved by the Township Board, PGOs would still have to come in for a special land use permit, but it just allows a little bit more flexibility on some of the more high-intensity commercial uses. For Zoning Board of Appeals, there was just 2 appeals that was in, they were both denied, that was in March, and it was basically 2 different appeals to the same administrative decision, and that was related to the usage of boats at Lakemore Resort. And you'll see land use permits and licenses. We're slightly up compared with this time last year for total land use permits. I think it's 28 this year versus 20 from this time last year. We added a few additional categories like food trucks, tree removal permit. You see the short-term rental licenses. We currently have a total of 135. That's up from when we reviewed this information in October. And I would say half of that increase is new permits. So there's been 7 additional licenses for 2022. And the remaining increase is the pending ones that we had in October. And those have been, that all the information has been gathered and processed and approved. And then Preston put together some updates on code enforcement activity. As you know, we've had a couple of larger blight cases in East Bay Township, as well as he's been pretty busy with some other, smaller blight cases that haven't made the news but have been just helpful in moving those forward. So he's been very successful with a number of different code enforcement activities. Attended some training. You'll recall that Preston got the zoning administrator certification, and other updates that's been mentioned by in previous meetings, but that was the exciting $900,000 that was earmarked for the extension of the 3-mile trail. So those are some of the highlights from this year. Happy to answer any questions.
It's been busy, and I want to thank Claire and the consultant as well, and staff, because they've really all pulled together and tried to cover and support each other and get through, because of obviously we had a joyous occasion that Claire was out of the office and with her new little one. So appreciate everybody kind of working together to get through that during a busy time. Can we move on to the short-term rental ordinance, unless there were any questions? Nope, I think you're good to go.
Okay. So there was a joint meeting between Township Board and Planning Commission in October. And one thing that you'll see in the the cover page for this agenda item, I attempted to kind of summarize some of the main discussion points of the board. But one thing that came out of that board discussion was if we're looking at updating the short-term rental licensing ordinance, and it's going to take time because we've got some information to gather, and we've got working with legal counsel. So the question that was posed was, can we adopt a moratorium on new short-term rental licenses while the township is evaluating the existing short-term rental licensing ordinance and making changes? So they don't have a huge influence, because we are looking at a potential cap on total short-term rental licenses. We wouldn't want the unintended impact to be a huge influx of new licenses coming to the township. So this would give the township the ability to, temporarily halt or not allow new licenses to be processed. We would continue to renew all existing licenses, and provide the township with the opportunity to really take a close look at the short-term rental licensing ordinance, which we plan to move forward on and bring back to you some draft language based on recommendations from the joint session.
Okay, with that, before we go to some board questions and discussion, I mentioned we would open this up to public comment. So if there's any public comment with respect to the moratorium, you can just stay there. If there's any public comment with respect to the short-term rentals and moratorium, please step on up to the podium, introduce yourself, and we'll use the same rules as earlier, and we're happy to hear your comment.
Hello, my name is Michael Irule. My wife and I reside at 928 Tamarack in East Bay Township. To begin with, I'm in full support of a moratorium on short-term rentals in East Bay Township. The first section of the short-term rental ordinance ends with the statement that the intent of the ordinance is to protect, and I quote, "protect the integrity of the residential neighborhood which were developed with this intent of single-family occupancy," end quote. As previously pointed out in other meetings, the Pine Grove neighborhood has become a hotel district, and the integrity of the neighborhood is being lost. I live at 928 Tamarack. Currently, there are 6 STRs located within 1,000 feet or less of my home. The house next door, 2 homes on Avenue E, 1 on Juniper, 1 on Indian Trail, and 1 on Parsons. The integrity of the neighborhood, this proliferation of short-term rentals threatens the integrity of East Bay Township schools. Every short-term rental displaces a residential home, and our local schools lose the revenue that a family with school-aged children may have generated. As pointed out by Roger Soldano in the recent letter to Record Eagle, each child brings $8,700 per year of state funding to the local school district. Our schools are being defunded by short-term rentals. In addition, short-term rentals have all but eliminated affordable housing and long-term rentals for workers in our community. Previous to the STR proliferation, the Pine Grove neighborhood had quite a few long-term rentals. They are occupied by township residents who sent their children to school in our township, who worked at local businesses, who shopped at local businesses. As the short-term rentals proliferate, they undermine Northwest Michigan's ability to serve the tourists we attract. To be clear, the short-term rentals within 1,000 feet of our home have all been purchased in the last few years with the intent of becoming short-term rentals. These homes were purchased specifically to run as hotels and take advantage of the current township ordinance that does nothing to cap or slow the proliferation. This is not a case of owner property rights. These are corporations or groups of people who are buying homes for business purposes only. There is no intent by the owners of these homes to occupy them. I support a moratorium as well as a cap on the number of short-term rental licenses well below the present number. Over time, as they drop off due to attrition, the limit will be met. Granting short-term rental licenses for owner-occupied homes only. Currently, corporations and realtors own these short-term rentals, not people trying to retain their family home. I propose a minimum of 30 to 90-day rentals for non-owner occupied short-term rentals, and a density limit, no closer than 2,000 feet between short-term rentals. On a personal basis, I always have a feeling of dread when I see a short-term renter coming and unloading their car next door. I wonder, how many dogs do they have? There is a fenced yard for dogs. The dogs don't recognize me. They often bark incessantly when I'm in my backyard. I'm relieved to see a family with small children, as they are usually a quieter group. If it is a group of men or women carrying in cases of beer, I often hope for a rainy night to keep the partiers from having a bonfire in the backyard. How many cars did they arrive in? They're up to 6 cars at a time, each having one with a door or lock beep, especially noted in the summer when the windows are open and the cars are returning to the STR at 2 a.m., or the last cigarette on the front porch when the renters return from the bar and relive the evening. We hear it.
Mr. Irelli, could you just wrap up?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice to speak.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this topic? Hello, Ms. Gonzalez, how are you?
Hi, my name's Nancy Gonzalez. I live at 709 Munson Avenue. I just want to say, in October 2017, when the board was just starting to consider the short-term rental ordinance, I came before this board and spoke, and this is a portion of what I said. Since the whole Airbnb concept has exploded worldwide, traditional neighborhoods have been decimated by investors and developers snapping up residential properties to convert to short-term rentals, particularly in desirable and resort communities like ours. This has resulted in the eventual economic strangulation of those businesses and services which are not based on seasonal vacationers or provide those services which are not tourist-related. Stress on their police and emergency services, an increase in the cost of property so that younger homeowners are forced out of the housing market, resulting in a decline in school enrollment, full-time residents having to police their neighbor's property and cause conflict between neighbors, a shortage of long-term rentals for local employees. I think that we're seeing these problems come to fruition now due to the approval of the short-term rental ordinance in 2019. Many spoke before this board in October about the purchases of homes in their neighborhoods resulting in short-term rentals and the horror stories of renters who just totally disregard the rules and the lack of enforcement by East Bay. Just in the past year, 3 homes in my neighborhood were listed for sale and each sold with multiple offers and all for astronomical amounts way over the asking price. The 3 homes ranged from 1,624 square feet to 2,072 square feet, so not huge, with 1/3 an acre or less of land and 50 to 87 feet of lake frontage. They sold from a price of $935,000 for the smallest to $1,555,000 for the one that was 2,000 square feet. Really ridiculous prices. And yes, they are all now short-term rentals. Their summer rental fees range from $900 to $1,200 per night. What family on vacation can afford to pay those types of prices? They don't. They come in groups, multiple families, multiple people, which just adds to the craziness. Currently, there are another 3 homes on Munson that were built specifically to be short-term rentals and are now on sale as a unit for $2.9 million. With these 3 currently, and the 4 which are across the street, there are 7 in one small little block on Munson Avenue, 7. In August of 2021, there were 126 licensed short-term rentals. Today, that number is 135. We need to get a grip on this. We need to stop this madness. Short-term rentals are like a cancer taking over our residential neighborhoods. I think that we have seen in the 3 years that this ordinance has been enforced that this is not about keeping the family cottage, as many stated in 2019. This is about the almighty dollar. This is about investors and groups snapping up homes in residential areas for profit, pure and simple. These people have no investment in our community. They're just here to make money.
Mrs. Gonzalez, could you wrap up?
Sure. Every day on Nextdoor, the neighborhood app, and Facebook, I see people begging for leads on housing to buy and rent. There simply isn't enough available. I would like to urge this board to take the first step at reining in this craziness. Please put a moratorium on adding additional short-term rentals until there can be a thorough evaluation of where we are and where we want to be, sooner rather than later. Please.
Thank you, Mrs. Gonzalez. Any other public comment? Hi, Ms. Bernardi, how are you?
Good, thank you for remembering my name. I am a full-time resident, homesteaded here, live on Rennie Lake. I do own a home in Florida. I've owned it, it's next door to my family members. I've owned it since 2004. I want to just share my experience with you regarding what happens in that neighborhood down there. Since 2004, that neighborhood had a boom just like East Bay is having. It's a residential neighborhood. It happens to be near a downtown that's just booming, and it happens to be on the water. People are coming in and we've already gone through this. They've come in and they've done the short-term rental, and the city didn't do anything about it. They sat on it, and they waited and waited. It is a complete nightmare for the city, for the citizens. This moratorium that you're referring to, it is really a great thing that you're getting out in front of it. And please don't take it lightly, because the nightmare that is happening down in St. Pete, Florida is out of control, and there's no bringing it back. And there's tax implications that the city's getting sued about. You know, I know these short-term rentals, there's tax implications. They've put all the Airbnbs out of business. It is such a big deal down there. Parking. The unintended consequences of these Airbnbs just multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. So that's my 2 cents worth. I can't give you enough forewarning as to how this thing snowballs if you don't get in front of it. So that's all my recommendation, is just to stay on top of it like you're already doing.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Hello, Ms. Kusel.
Hello again. Like the others that spoke on this topic, I also urge you to vote for the moratorium on the short-term rentals. Please note that the number of active licenses has already increased from the proposal in your packet that says 120 to what Ms. Carner said is the current number of 135. Also, please recall that the STRs are significantly clustered in primarily 2 areas, although given Mrs. Gonzalez information tonight, maybe we can add 3 to that, sadly. One of those cluster areas is Spider Lake. Please recall that at the October meeting in 2021, it was a joint meeting, I shared a detailed handout with a number of short-term rental properties on Spider Lake, plus the additional rental properties that are present on Spider Lake, given all the cabin courts. There's at least a half a dozen, and each of those has multiple rental units on them. And to my understanding, those cabin court rentals do not require short-term licensing. So as you proceed to talk about and update the short-term the short-term rental ordinance, maybe this is really going back to the PC if you put in the moratorium, but I hope that you and the PC Planning Commission will incorporate ways that will not allow concentration in neighborhood communities like Spider Lake, like the avenues, like the section on, I believe it's on 31 that Ms. Gonzalez spoke about. A total cap for the entire township doesn't support the health, safety, and welfare of those in the neighborhoods with those short-term rental concentrations. What seemed to be before the state legislature of 30% of all of the residential properties you have in your township. Well, at Spider Lake, we've already hit the 30%, but if the state goes for that, or you folks go for that, that means Spider Lake or these other concentrated areas could go up to 60 or 75. Lastly, incorporate the cabin court rental units in your STR licensing. And again, to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, our township citizens, but also the visitors who stay at those rental properties. So this time, I thank you and the Planning Commission and the staff for bringing this moratorium suggestion to this point in the process.
Thank you, Mrs. Kusel. Any further public comment? Hello, Mr. Parker?
Good memory.
Okay.
Yes, Robert Parker, 901 Garfield Avenue, Traverse City. I'm here this evening on behalf of Riello Estado, which is owner of property contiguous to the Lakemore Resort on Lake Arbutus. Lakemore Resort is considered a cabin court. My client, Riello Estado, does not really have a particular interest in the STR moratorium under consideration this evening, but it does have an interest in removal of the exemption from cabin courts from the STR ordinance. As noted in the preamble to the moratorium, the increase in STRs will, quote, negatively impact housing availability, create land use conflicts, and alter the character of the township's residential neighborhoods, unquote. A cabin court is really nothing more than a collection of short-term rentals. The business model is the same. Cabin courts are like STRs in that they're essentially a commercial venture. Recognizing that, I think the township this past November removed cabin courts as a use as of right within the Lake Area District.
And
However,
I'm sorry, Mr. Parker, I do want to remind you that this is public comment based on the moratorium for the short-term rental ordinance. So if
Yes.
you can tie that together, that'd be great.
Well, I think what I would suggest is if you are going to do a moratorium, I think that you should have some sort of ad hoc committee or a blue ribbon committee formed to look at this ordinance in general. And when they do, I think one of the things they should do is to remove the exemption from short-term rentals, or for cabin courts from the exemption. So anyway, those are our opinions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Okay, we will bring this back to the board. Claire has gone over the information in the packet. Are there questions, comments from board members? I do have one quick question. This would probably be more for Sue or for me, but the moratorium is an ordinance. So I believe the best that we could do tonight is an introduction of that ordinance. Okay. Okay. Comments? Thoughts?
Well, can I just ask a question? I'm glad that Mindy pulled Granicus off, or Granicus off the, for full discussion, because we're looking at 2021 having 120 short-term rentals, 2022 currently having 135.
Yeah, I think we had 126, and they just,
Okay.
in the language that the attorney drafted, they just had it below that, so they said over
Okay.
120.
And then Granicus wants to charge us for monitoring 294. What's the difference?
So Granicus is looking at not just the number of short-term rentals that you have. They're also looking at any that are operating outside of that ordinance.
So we still have that many that are operating outside of?
Don't forget, go ahead.
The majority are in the regional business district, and they're the Tamarack and some of those.
The beach
that-
and
That have they
Point
kind of
Center.
function like hotels, but they have the timeshare ownership.
Thank you. I was just trying to understand why there was such a large gap.
Yeah.
It's confusing to track data.
I have to remind myself every time they send a monthly or quarterly report when I see that. I'm always like, yeah.
I'm sure I have many other questions, but I just wanted clarification for that so I can continue to wrap. Thank you.
Other comments or questions?
Is 6 months long enough?
I don't think Claire heard you.
6 months long enough?
She was pausing.
Because we worked on the one that we had longer than 6
years.
months. And, you know, to get the public comment, to get everybody to come to a place where we have something that's ready to go, I'm not sure that that is long enough.
Would we be able to do 6 months and then extend it?
Well, it's an ordinance, so you would probably want to go with a longer period of time and then potentially shorten that, because it's a much easier process to rescind that than,
Okay, that's a good point. Because I think it could definitely reasonably go longer than that. We'll have draft language well before that, but I think the process
The
of
pro-
vetting and, yeah.
The process, I mean, yeah, we can have a starting point within that 6 months for sure, but I don't think that it will be done.
No, that's a good
But this
point.
is a rewrite, correct? Not a whole new ordinance.
Right, and I wouldn't say it's a complete rewrite, but we're focused on the cap, looking at distance separation, looking at,
Right.
total licenses that have.
Yeah, we're much further ahead than we were before. I'm just saying, it may still take time, but I'm just saying we're much further ahead than what we were.
And the thing, when we did this last time, we had public comment in one direction, and while we got into the process, 6, 8, 10 months later, we had public comment in the complete other direction, and it was like, wait, we missed, we didn't miss it, we just didn't
They didn't all come at once.
know. It was a very different,
It was.
started in the lakes, but then,
they were extremely different meetings.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
2 years' worth of very different meetings.
Well, and I think part of it too was initially, or the thought process, it was to be able to keep the family home. But the intention now, what we're hearing is it's buying them as income parcels with no intent and not having had it been a family home.
So I guess my other question is in your list of things, oh, that's in here, never mind.
So for clarification of anybody watching, the resolution that would be the ordinance change for the temporary moratorium would be that East Bay Charter Township would temporarily prohibit the establishment of new short-term rentals and the issuance of new licenses for short-term rentals pending further study, enactment, and effective ordinance amendment to Ordinance 5 of 2019. The ordinance shall not prohibit the renewal of short-term rental licenses that were issued by the township prior to the effective date of this ordinance. So thus, anybody who has a current license would be entitled to continue with that license and update it as well. Nothing in this ordinance shall be construed to authorize the operation of any short-term rental without a validly issued license from the township. The renewal, the ordinance shall terminate and be of no further effect 6 months from the effective date of the ordinance unless the township board extends the moratorium or terminates the moratorium. Okay, well, hold on, maybe you do not have to go through the entire ordinance process then, because if this is part of it, I'm thinking that is exactly what Chris Patterson was anticipating. If an extension or termination is approved, the township will publish notice of its adoption. So it sounds like a more simplified process of a notification. Section 3, should any portion of the ordinance be found invalid for any reason, such holding shall not be construed affecting the validity of the remaining portions. Repeal, all ordinance or parts of the ordinance in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent necessary to give this ordinance full effect. And publication goes over the regular publication that we would always follow and the effective date.
So he's saying because we already have the ordinance, it does not need a new introduction?
Part of the ordinance would be this that has the extension, potential for extension or termination in the moratorium. And again, if it's an extension or termination, then it's just a notice of its adoption.
This ordinance has to have a public hearing, and so we have to set a public hearing. But if we do an extension or a, whatever
Okay,
they
the
called it,
initial
that
needs to
does
be,
not
not the
have to.
extension. Thank
Right.
you.
So,
Just need a motion to set a public hearing.
to introduce,
Isn't
To-
this the introduction? Then we need to set a public hearing, right?
we can do that at both. We can, this is the introduction of this and set the public hearing.
Right.
I didn't go over those steps again with Chris, did you?
I guess I was under the, impression that the public, that it would, that there would be a notice and an introduction and then a subsequent meeting.
Well,
But is there a public hearing?
Well, typical ordinance introduction happens before the notice in the paper, letting the public know that there will be a public hearing
Okay,
at a meeting to be determined ahead of time.
okay.
So if it was to be at the May meeting or the June meeting, since it sounds like the May meeting may be a little full, I don't know, or a special meeting. So you would do a notice of public hearing now on that set date, which would allow people to put something in writing or to attend in person and speak under the public hearing.
But this comes to the township board for the public hearing, not the planning commission.
Correct.
Because it's a general law.
Yeah, correct.
Correct.
So I mean, I don't know if our May meeting is full already.
Well, it's go rec, so I would think so.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
In the June meeting, we'll have the audit, but we could have the audit first.
Yeah, and I would anticipate that there, I mean, I wasn't a part of the initial drafting of the short-term rental, but I would think a public hearing for this moratorium would not be we would not get as much input. It wouldn't be as lengthy as the, public hearing.
I would say it may be,
I would say it may be.
because I think there have been changes perceived or not perceived. And we have to be able to offer everyone that has an opinion, the ability to have that say.
But this is, I think what she's alluding to is this isn't setting the ordinance, this is just setting the moratorium.
Yeah, but you have that group that,
There's an interest.
So probably the most conservative way to do it would be tonight would be the introduction, and we'll set the public hearing. And then if there's and we'll put that on a process according to the agenda schedules. And then if there's some change in that with consultation with our legal counsel, then we would adopt that. We would amend that process.
so do you need a motion to put it for public hearing?
Yeah, I think if a motion to formally introduce this ordinance and to set the public hearing.
You do that in the same meeting?
To set the public
I
hearing?
thought we said this was the introduction.
Yes, but let's just formally, it's not noticed as an introduction. I would just say this is the introduction.
So then
Okay.
you're pushing it to
So
two
it's
subsequent
June or
meetings.
July at this point?
June. Yeah, I would set it for June. So it would be a motion to introduce this temporary moratorium ordinance for short-term rentals and set the public hearing date for June. Does that not make sense?
Clear as mud.
And this, tonight was the introduction, correct?
No, she's saying.
No,
Well, I'm-
she's saying doing it another one.
She's saying have it be noticed on the agenda that it's an introduction.
Actually, what I was saying is acknowledge that tonight's the introduction of this ordinance.
Okay, let's have some clarification. Let's start again.
That's what the clarification was, that
Okay,
this
so-
motion to introduce this tonight and to set the public hearing.
For June. I'll make that motion, what she just said.
Is that clear, Ann?
But let me go,
Sure, go ahead.
when you made the statement that you didn't notice it on the agenda correctly, you wanted to make sure it was noted correctly. To me, and not that I'm saying I want it to be delayed, to me, that makes the sound that you want the public to have the opportunity to see an introduction.
No, I didn't say that we noticed it incorrectly. I'm saying it didn't have the terminology of introduction, but we are introducing it here. We've had public comment. I think that that flies. However, we will consult with legal counsel this week, make sure we're going through the right process. So, and I just don't want them to say, you didn't have an introduction. That's why I'm saying
No, that's what I
acknowledge
wanted to be
tonight.
sure that
Yeah.
what you're saying is clear as mud in the minutes so that it can be relayed correctly to the attorney.
Right. So when we say the motion is, motion to acknowledge tonight's introduction of this ordinance and set the public hearing date for the June regular township board meeting, then we will check with legal counsel. If that's great, then we'll go according to that plan. If they say, no, you needed an official introduction notice or whatever, then we'll do that in May. And that will be the introduction, but we'll do the public hearing still in June.
Question.
Yeah.
I didn't think you had to do anything for an introduction.
I don't think you do either. I think this is sufficient, but I could be wrong. I'm just acknowledging they might.
So, but I was, in listening to what was being said, it started to become really muddy. And so now it's clear.
I want to clarify that we're correct, is what I'm saying. Unless Ann has Peter on speed dial. I'm kidding.
I don't know, you sent me a picture of the dog. Probably up.
Working hard.
Okay, so I make a motion that following this introduction to a short-term rental ordinance moratorium, that we set the public hearing for June's regular meeting.
Okay, there is a motion. Is there support?
Support.
Okay, motion made by Walters, support by M. Cortate. Further discussion? Okay, it's a resolution, so we'll do a roll call vote.
Walters.
Yes.
M. Cortate.
Yes.
Bartlett.
Yes.
S. Cortate.
Yes.
Lyle.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes, motion passes. Okay, and with that, Claire, can I get you to say just 2 seconds more on the Granicus contract? And you will find that on page 28 of your packet. And I think, okay, oh, you had a question on it, Sue, but you said that was clarified. Mindy, you pulled it from the agenda. What can we clarify for you on this?
I just want to make sure that we have recovered from the negative balance that we had.
Very good question, and that is something that we talked about during the pre-audit. If you'll recall, one of the reasons that fund gets wrapped into our general funds, and so we haven't caught that up yet because we would have been in negative but we have tracked it. We've provided that tracking to you guys previously. And Steve and I went over that during the pre-audit to bring that up during the 2022 fiscal year so that all of the charges are correctly placed into that fund. And that any funding that was pre-done through the general fund is correctly charged to that account.
Okay, so,
She doesn't know yet.
thank you. Okay.
I thought I had to.
You did in a really long, confusing way.
Oh, I've been known to do that. And did I say I got up at 3:45 a.m. this morning?
Dude, it was a yes or no question.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that this is the best thing that we have out there for them, because I know that, we've got neighbors that have complained about calls going to nowhere and everything. So I just want to make sure that this is what we need and how we need it this time.
So, quick clarification, hopefully. We previously had Granicus, but we also had an intern that dealt almost solely with short-term rentals. And so we dropped it because he was really picking all of that up. Well, with the increase in activity that we've had in planning and zoning, PT and Leslie and Claire had talked and think that this is a good thing to leverage more time out of the planning and zoning department through their handling this. So we want to go back and try that. We have previously dropped things, as you've seen, but because we're adding and they're amending the contract, we definitely need to have the board's approval to do so.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I know we added it
And
and
the-
taken it away, and I know that residents weren't happy with the service that they were getting, so.
And no disrespect to any resident comments, but one thing you have to be aware of is when they say there isn't, not specific on any one comment, but I'm saying in general, when people say there's not a resolution, sometimes their complaint maybe hasn't gone through the right process. So a complaint is not like a documented complaint. It might be to the short-term rental person in the house, which doesn't go anywhere. And it really should go to the owner, which is why we have them give that information. Then if they continue to have problems, go to the township. But we're not here all the time, as someone mentioned. And it should go to the CPOs and to the non-emergency sheriff's department number.
So are we having the CPOs, so if this is in place and this is where they're calling, was the CPO?
Well, they're not calling Granicus.
Okay.
They're not calling Granicus.
Okay.
This is strictly for notification to, like the notification letters, you're out of compliance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We had previously had a contract with Granicus, and it was a hotline, and it was not working, and so we're able to take care of it more effectively
That's
in our
what
department.
for some reason,
Yeah.
that's what I thought this
This
was.
is a new service.
Okay,
Adding
okay.
And when we say it wasn't working, no disrespect to them, we looked at the calls that were going in there, and it wasn't hitting the calls that it was supposed to be
It
hitting.
wasn't feasible in the way we intended it to.
Mhm. It just wasn't getting used that way.
And that's where our residents were having complaints, is that it would go into a black hole.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't even know about them.
Yeah, and that's like too, like part of the noise ordinance, when people say, like as far as calling the CPOs, that's, oh, we shouldn't, like, because the zoning administration staff is only here, Monday through Thursday and not on the weekends. Actually, the noise ordinance is enforced by the Grand Traverse Sheriff's Office. That's what's written into the ordinance, so that's appropriate to call there.
Okay, that's where my confusion was, is that I thought this was the hotline again, and that didn't work. Okay, I'm good with it. Do you need a motion to approve the Granicus
Yes.
contract? Is there a number or something with it?
I don't think there is. I think there was just a motion on there.
It would have been on the consent calendar.
I'll move to approve the First Amendment to the Granicus Service Agreement between Granicus LLC and East Bay Charter Township.
Okay, is there a second?
So moved.
Motion by Walters, support by M. Cortade. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by no? Okay, motion passes. All right, let's see, I think unless I'm mistaken, we are at second public comment. Is there any public who would like to make public comment at this point in time?
Yes.
And we do just accept public comment on a topic one time. Thank you, Ms. Bernardi.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer the question here. I have a question procedurally, probably Claire can answer it. What is the process here? In my reviews of previous minutes of meetings of the Planning Commission, going back to last year, I saw that there was an application for a grant from the Rotary to fund part of the master plan. What is the process for the public to learn if that actually ever took place, if it was approved or not approved?
Sure. So you can
Did it
just,
happen?
you can follow up with planning and zoning staff tomorrow.
What is the process?
I would just call Claire. She would,
So, I'm sorry, does that actually get announced in a meeting, or does the public have
Well-
to call Claire?
well, we don't get back and forth during public comment, so I don't want to start that. So just follow up later with Claire or myself. I'd be happy to go through that with you.
Okay, thank you. Probably could be considered related, so I will end my comment.
You, very quickly, go ahead.
It was very interesting listening to how you were determining expenses for ambulances and such. And I just want, and it is related, I just want to make sure that we aren't pushing expenses for enforcement onto taxpayers in the future for enforcement. Police, after hours, there's one enforcement officer on that premises. I just want to make sure that you, as you go forward in considering the GO-REC application, that you realize and do pay attention to the fact that we all pay taxes, and we know that they don't. So just be cognizant of that as you review the application going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Bernardi.
Okay,
Thank you. Have a good evening. Any further public comment? Okay, with that, Sue, would you make sure we get the different handouts from the two individuals to all the board members?
I will scan them to everyone in the morning.
Okay, sounds good. With that, our next meeting date is May 9th, 2022, and unless there's any objection, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.